It must be so sad spending Christmas all alone, Caitlin, Tiffany said with a phony, saccharine smile, loud enough for everyone at the party to hear. Don't worry. Maybe one day you'll finally have the family you always wanted, but couldn't have with Mark. The guests chuckled cruelly, and Mark just stood there smirking as his ex-wife was put on the spot, utterly mortified. What they didn't know, what they could never have guessed, was that Caitlin's real family was bigger and more incredible than they could ever imagine, and it was waiting right outside the door. But before we see how Caitlin makes them pay, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get into the full story. Did you really think I would invite you to my home after everything? The cutting words from 2 years ago echoed in Caitlin Thompson's mind as she pulled the heavy, gilded envelope from her mailbox. Caitlin stood frozen on her driveway, staring at the elaborate script that spelled out her name with such precise artistry. She knew exactly what this was before even opening it. There was no mistaking it. The annual Wilson Christmas party invitation. She hadn't received one last year, the first year after the divorce, and she'd assumed that chapter of her life was closed for good. Miss Thompson. A small, piping voice pulled her attention back to the present moment. Are you okay? Caitlin forced a smile at 8-year-old Joey from next door and quickly tucked the offensive envelope into her coat pocket. Out of sight. I'm fine, sweetie. Just thinking about something. Shouldn't you be inside? It's getting cold out here. Mom says dinner is in 20 minutes, Joey chirped, kicking at a pile of fallen leaves before running back toward his warm, inviting home. Inside her modest Greenwich rental, a far cry from the sprawling mansion she used to share with Mark, Caitlin dropped her teacher's bag unceremoniously by the door and pulled out the envelope again, as if compelled by some morbid fascination. Her fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as she tore it open with a decisive rip. Mr. and Mrs. Mark Wilson request the pleasure of your company at their annual Christmas celebration. Caitlin sank heavily onto her couch, the invitation suddenly feeling like a lead weight in her hand. Why now? After 2 years of blissful silence, why would Mark and his new wife, the picture-perfect Tiffany, want her, of all people, at their home? The phone rang, pulling her from her troubled thoughts and the swirling questions that threatened to consume her. Greenwich Elementary, Ms. Thompson speaking, she answered automatically, her voice still tinged with professional habit. You're home, not at school? Her best friend Rachel laughed warmly, a familiar sound that always managed to lift her spirits, if only slightly. Bad day with the third graders? Sorry, teacher habits? Caitlin sighed, running a hand through her hair. Actually, something weird just happened. I got an invitation to Mark and Tiffany's Christmas party. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out for several agonizing seconds, thick with disbelief. Tell me you're joking, Rachel finally said, her voice laced with a mixture of concern and outrage. After how they treated you. After how he left you when the fertility treatments weren't working fast enough for him. It's addressed to me specifically, not a mistake, Caitlin confirmed, holding up the offending invitation as if it were evidence in a trial. You're not going, right? Please tell me you're not even considering it. Caitlin looked at the ornate invitation again, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I don't know, Rachel. Caitlin, that man divorced you after 5 years because you couldn't give him children, then married a model half his age who immediately got pregnant. Now they want to parade their perfect little family in front of you? This is cruel even for them. She's not half his age, Caitlin corrected absently, always one to adhere to facts, even in the face of emotional turmoil. Tiffany is 28. Mark is 38. Whatever. The point is they're obviously inviting you to rub their happiness in your face. Don't give them the satisfaction. Caitlin walked slowly to her kitchen window and looked out at the darkening December sky, the early twilight casting long, somber shadows across the landscape. Maybe it's time I stopped hiding, she murmured, more to herself than to Rachel. Hiding from what? You moved on brilliantly. New job, new place. Rachel? Caitlin interrupted, her voice taking on a newfound urgency. There's something I never told you. Something big. What are you talking about? You're starting to worry me here. I can't explain over the phone. Can you come over tomorrow after school? Around 4 o'clock? Rachel hesitated, the silence on the line pregnant with unspoken questions. You're scaring me a little. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, Caitlin said, a hint of mischievousness creeping into her tone. But I need to show you something. And after that, I think I might go to that party after all. After hanging up with Rachel, Caitlin opened her laptop and navigated to a familiar travel booking website. With a decisive click, she booked a one-way ticket from Boston to LaGuardia for December 21st, 3 days before the infamous party, sealing her fate. She then made another call, her voice now filled with purpose. Martha, it's Caitlin. I need a huge favor. She paused, taking a deep breath. Yes, it's about the girls. We're going on a trip. A very important trip. After finishing her calls and putting her plan into motion, Caitlin changed into comfortable clothes, shedding the professional attire of Ms. Thompson, third-grade teacher. She prepared a simple dinner, a far cry from the elaborate meals she used to prepare for Mark in their former life. She ate while mindlessly scrolling through her phone, her thumb stopping abruptly at an Instagram post from Tiffany Wilson, the woman who now occupied her former place. The photo showed an elaborately decorated living room, a testament to Tiffany's meticulous taste and boundless resources. Tiffany herself was radiant, holding baby Jackson in front of an enormous Christmas tree that seemed to stretch all the way to the vaulted ceiling. Mark stood proudly behind them, his hand possessively on Tiffany's shoulder, smiling for the camera as if he had everything he ever wanted. Perfect little family, Caitlin whispered, a bittersweet ache in her voice, then set her phone down with a decisive thud, banishing the image from her sight. At 9 o'clock, her phone buzzed insistently with a video call. She answered it immediately, her face lighting up with anticipation. Hi, Mom. Her mother's familiar face appeared on the screen, her warm smile a comforting presence. Are they still up? Caitlin asked, her eyes searching the background. Just finished their baths. They're all clean and in pajamas. Want to say goodnight? The camera swiveled to show a nursery bathed in soft, golden light, and Caitlin's heart nearly burst with love. There, in 4 identical cribs, sat 4 identical toddler girls, each with light brown curls and hazel eyes that sparkled with mischief. They squealed with delight when they saw Caitlin's face, their tiny voices a chorus of pure joy. Mama, they called in unison, reaching tiny hands toward the screen as if they could somehow bridge the distance between them. Hi, my loves. Caitlin's eyes filled with tears, her voice thick with emotion. Emma, Olivia, Ava, Sophia. Mama misses you so much. They've been angels today, her mother said, turning the camera back to her face. Your father read them 3 stories before they'd settle down. They definitely have your stubborn streak. And their father's eyes, Caitlin said quietly, her gaze lingering on the faces of her daughters. Mom, I've made a decision. I'm coming home early, the day after tomorrow, and I'm taking the girls to Connecticut for Christmas. Her mother's expression grew serious, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and apprehension. Are you sure that's wise? Mark doesn't even know they exist. This is a huge step, Caitlin. He will soon, Caitlin said firmly, her resolve hardening. I got an invitation to their Christmas party. It's time. Oh, Caitlin, is this really how you want to do this? There has to be a better way. Caitlin nodded firmly, her chin set with determination. They're 14 months old now. It's time their father knew about them, even if he never wanted them. Even if he never wants them. And how do you think Tiffany will react when you show up with 4 babies that look just like her husband? This could be a disaster, Caitlin. Have you thought this through? That's not my concern, Caitlin said, though her stomach twisted nervously at the thought of the confrontation. My only concern is my daughters knowing where they came from. They deserve to know their father, whether he wants to be a father or not. After saying goodnight to her mother and blowing countless kisses to her sleepy daughters, Caitlin opened a desk drawer and pulled out a legal document, the weight of its implications heavy in her hand. The official agreement signed during their divorce, the very document that had severed her ties to Mark, now held the key to her future. It gave her full rights to use the embryos they had created during fertility treatments, a fact that Mark had clearly overlooked in his haste to move on. Mark had been so eager to end their marriage, to escape the disappointment and the perceived failure, that he barely read the paperwork. His mind focused solely on severing ties and starting anew. He just wanted out, away from the disappointment, away from the woman who couldn't give him the children he so desperately wanted. The irony wasn't lost on Caitlin. It was a bitter pill she had swallowed countless times over the past year. The embryos Mark had so readily forgotten about, the very symbols of their failed attempts at parenthood, had resulted in not one child, but 4 identical little girls, each a perfect miniature of their father, with his chin, his eyes, and his dimples. She looked at their most recent photo on her phone, a snapshot of pure, unadulterated joy. All 4 girls were dressed in matching turkey outfits for Thanksgiving, their faces smeared with sweet potato and cranberry sauce. Emma, the leader, always in front, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Olivia, the quiet observer, clutching her favorite blanket, her gaze thoughtful and serene. Ava, the comedian, mid-laugh, her infectious joy radiating from the image. And Sophia, the peacemaker, holding her sister's hand, her gentle nature evident even in a photograph. For 14 months, she had kept her daughters a secret from their father, building a new life in Boston, shielded from the judgment and expectations of her old one. With the unwavering help from her parents and Martha, the retired nurse she'd hired part-time to help manage the demands of raising quadruplets. She'd created a bubble of safety and love, protecting the girls from the rejection she had experienced, determined that they would never feel the sting of being unwanted. But seeing that Christmas party invitation, that blatant display of Mark's new, perfect life, had changed something deep within her. Maybe it was time to stop hiding, to step out of the shadows and into the light. Maybe it was time for Mark to know that despite leaving her for being barren, for failing to fulfill his desire for children, she had, against all odds, given birth to 4 beautiful girls, his daughters, a testament to the enduring power of hope and the resilience of the human spirit. Caitlin picked up her phone one last time, her fingers flying across the screen. Martha, one more thing. Could you make sure the girls have matching Christmas dresses? Something in red velvet with white bows would be perfect. She paused, picturing the girls in her mind, their eyes sparkling with holiday cheer. Yes, for the party. We'll need to make quite an entrance. As she hung up, Caitlin looked again at the photo of her daughters, their innocent faces filled with a joy that transcended words. It's time to meet your father, she whispered, feeling both terrified and strangely powerful at the same time, a potent mix of fear and determination swirling within her. She slipped the party invitation into her purse, the crisp paper a tangible reminder of her decision, her course now firmly set. Caitlin Thompson would attend Mark and Tiffany Wilson's Christmas party, but she wouldn't be coming alone. The next morning, Caitlin woke up early, the events of the previous day replaying in her mind. Her first thought was about the dress she would need for the party, something that would make her feel strong and confident, something that would help her face Mark and Tiffany with her head held high. After her morning coffee, she called Rachel again, needing her friend's support more than ever. I need to go shopping for a dress today after school. Can you come with me? Rachel sighed loudly, her exasperation evident even over the phone. You're really going to that party, aren't you? Despite everything, despite my warnings, you're actually going through with this. Yes, Caitlin said firmly. And I have something incredibly important to tell you when I see you. Something that will explain everything. This better be good, Rachel said, her tone softening slightly. Meet me at the mall at 4:30. At the department store that afternoon, Caitlin moved purposefully through the racks of holiday dresses, the vibrant colors and festive fabrics blurring into a kaleidoscope of options. Nothing felt quite right. Nothing seemed to capture the complex emotions swirling within her, until she spotted it, hanging almost unnoticed in a corner. A simple but elegant royal blue dress, its clean lines and classic silhouette radiating an understated sophistication that appealed to her practical sensibilities. The color was stunning, a shade that would bring out the deep blue of her eyes and complement her fair complexion. That color is absolutely perfect on you, Rachel said as Caitlin emerged from the fitting room, twirling slightly to showcase the dress. But I still don't understand why you're putting yourself through this, why you're subjecting yourself to their judgment and their carefully constructed happiness. Caitlin took a deep breath, steeling herself for the revelation she was about to share. Rachel, after the divorce, I moved to Boston, as you know. I needed a fresh start, a clean break from everything that reminded me of Mark and our failed attempts to build a family. I know that. You told me all about your new job, your cute little apartment, your new life. What you don't know is that before I left Greenwich, before I packed up my life and moved on, I used the embryos Mark and I created during our fertility treatments. Rachel's mouth fell open in disbelief, her eyes widening with shock. You what? You're telling me that after everything, after the heartbreak and the disappointment, you went ahead and... I had the legal right to use them, Caitlin interrupted, her voice firm but gentle. It was explicitly stated in our divorce agreement. Mark didn't even bother to read the fine print. He was too eager to get out. Are you saying that I have 14-month-old quadruplet daughters? 4 identical little girls? Rachel grabbed the wall to steady herself, her knees suddenly feeling weak. For babies, all by yourself? How is that even possible? I can't even imagine the sheer exhaustion, the overwhelming responsibility. I had help, Caitlin explained, her voice softening with gratitude. My parents moved from Arizona to be closer to me, to help me raise them. I hired a part-time nanny named Martha, who has been an absolute lifesaver. My neighbors in Boston have been amazing, offering support and understanding at every turn. I couldn't have done it without them. And Mark has absolutely no idea? He's completely in the dark about all of this? Caitlin shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. He's about to find out. At the Christmas party. I'm bringing the girls with me. Rachel's eyes widened even further, if that were possible, her hand flying to her mouth in astonishment. Oh my God, you're going to bring 4 babies, 4 identical little girls, to their party? That's insane, Caitlin. That's absolutely the most audacious, incredible thing I've ever heard. That's exactly what I'm going to do, Caitlin said, a determined glint in her eyes. It's time for Mark to face the consequences of his actions, to acknowledge the existence of his daughters, whether he wants to or not. Later that evening, after returning home and putting the finishing touches on her plan, Caitlin called Martha to discuss the logistics for the party. We should definitely do a practice run, Martha suggested over the phone, her voice calm and practical. Getting all 4 of them dressed in fancy outfits at once is going to be a challenge, to say the least. We need to iron out any potential kinks before the big day. That's a great idea, Caitlin agreed, grateful for Martha's experience and level-headedness. I'll be home tomorrow. We can practice on Saturday. We'll turn it into a fun little dress rehearsal. Have you thought about where we should wait with the girls before the party? Martha asked, her mind already focused on the practical details. We can't exactly sit in the car for hours. They'll get restless and cranky. There's a coffee shop about 2 blocks from Mark's house. I checked it on Google Maps. It looks cozy and inviting. We can wait there until I text you, giving you the signal to bring the girls. And you're absolutely sure about this, Caitlin? Martha asked, her voice laced with concern. Once this happens, once you reveal the existence of the girls, everything changes. There's no going back. Caitlin looked at the party invitation lying on her kitchen counter, its ornate script mocking her with its promise of a perfect, unattainable life. I'm sure, she said, her voice unwavering. Her phone buzzed with a text message, breaking the spell of her thoughts. She looked down and felt her stomach tighten when she saw it was from Tiffany. Just confirming you're coming to our party. We're so looking forward to seeing you. Do you need a +1 arrangement since you're still single? Happy to accommodate. T. Caitlin stared at the message, the condescending tone clear as day, the subtle jab about her single status, the veiled implication that she was somehow incomplete without a partner, sent a surge of anger through her. No +1 needed, she typed back, her hands shaking slightly as she composed the curt response. "See you at 7. For a moment, doubt crept in, whispering insidious questions in the back of her mind. Was she making the right decision? Did she have the right to disrupt Mark's new life, to shatter the carefully constructed facade of happiness he had built with Tiffany? Was she acting out of anger and spite, or out of a genuine desire to do what was best for her daughters? She opened her phone gallery and scrolled through the countless pictures of Emma, Olivia, Ava, and Sophia, their innocent faces gazing back at her with unwavering love. Their eyes, so like Mark's, held the answer she was searching for. They deserved to know their father, to have the opportunity to build a relationship with him, and he deserved to know about them, to experience the joy and the responsibility of being a father, even if he might ultimately reject them. 20 miles away in Greenwich, Tiffany Wilson was directing the staff around her mansion with an air of imperious authority. "The ice sculpture needs to go there, not there," she snapped at a hapless delivery man, her voice sharp and impatient. "And make sure the lighting hits it just right. It needs to be absolutely perfect." Mark walked into the room, barely looking up from his phone, his attention seemingly consumed by the endless stream of emails and messages that demanded his attention. "The guest list is finalized," he announced absently, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Yes," Tiffany said, a smug smile spreading across her face. "Everyone who's anyone will be here. It's going to be the party of the year. Oh, and your ex-wife is coming too," she added casually, as if it were an afterthought. Mark's head shot up, his eyes widening with surprise and disbelief. "Caitlin? You invited her? Why would you do that?" Tiffany smiled sweetly, her eyes glinting with a hint of malice. "Don't you think it will be nice for her to see how happy we are? How perfect our family is? It's the least we can do, considering all she's missed out on." "That seems completely unnecessary," Mark said, his brow furrowing with concern. "I don't want to cause her any unnecessary pain." "It's my party too, Mark," Tiffany said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "And I want her to see what she couldn't give you. I want her to understand the life she threw away when she couldn't provide you with an heir." Tiffany picked up their son, Jackson, from his elaborate playpen, showering him with kisses. "Smile, baby," she cooed. "Mommy needs a new Instagram post. We need to show the world how blessed we are." She posed with Jackson in front of their towering 12-foot Christmas tree, taking several pictures from various angles before handing him back to the nanny with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Take him upstairs for his nap," Tiffany instructed, "and make sure his Christmas outfit for the party is perfectly pressed. He needs to look his best for his adoring fans." Mark watched as the nanny took their son away, his expression troubled. "Do you think it's a good idea to have Jackson up so late for the party?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "He's only 13 months old. He needs his rest." "He needs to be there," Tiffany said, her voice firm and unyielding. "He's the whole point of the party. To show everyone our perfect little family, our perfect little life. He's the ultimate accessory." In Boston the next day, Caitlin returned to her small apartment, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Her mother opened the door before she could even knock, her face beaming with warmth and relief. "Mama's home," she called out, her voice filled with affection. The sound of little feet, followed by excited squeals, filled the apartment, a symphony of pure, unadulterated joy that melted Caitlin's anxieties away. Four identical toddlers in matching pajamas came wobbling around the corner, arms outstretched, their faces lit up with pure love and adoration. "My babies!" Caitlin dropped to her knees, gathering all four of them into her arms, burying her face in their soft, fragrant hair. "I missed you so much," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They've been asking for you all day," her father said, appearing from the kitchen, his face creased with a loving smile. "Well, saying mama and pointing at your picture. They know exactly who their mommy is." Caitlin kissed each girl on the head, inhaling their sweet scent. "Emma, my brave leader," she whispered, caressing her oldest daughter's cheek. "Olivia, my quiet thinker. Ava, my little comedian. And Sophia, my sweet peacemaker. Are you absolutely sure about this party plan? Her mother asked, watching Caitlin with the girls. Her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and admiration. This is a huge step, Caitlin. Could change everything. Mom, they need to know where they came from, Caitlin said, her voice firm and unwavering. And Mark needs to know about them. Even if it hurts him. Even if it shatters his carefully constructed world. Even if it hurts his new wife and their baby? Her mother asked gently, her eyes filled with compassion. Caitlin looked up, her expression resolute. I'm not doing this to hurt anyone, she said, her voice filled with conviction. I'm doing this because it's the truth, and the truth shouldn't stay hidden. They deserve to know their father, and he deserves to know them. The next morning, Martha arrived at the apartment, her arms laden with bags and boxes. She carried 4 identical red velvet dresses with white satin bows, each perfectly sized for Caitlin's daughters. Let's see if we can get them all dressed for our practice run, she said, her voice cheerful and optimistic. We need to make sure we can pull this off without any major meltdowns. It took nearly 45 minutes of coaxing, bribing, and gentle maneuvering to get all 4 girls into their dresses, tights, and tiny black shoes. By the time they were finished, Emma had already smudged chocolate on her pristine white collar. Ava had taken off one shoe and was attempting to chew on it, and Sophia was crying softly because Olivia had playfully pulled her hair. This is going to be harder than I thought, Caitlin laughed, wiping a stray tear from her eye. We'll get it right on party day, Martha assured her, her voice filled with confidence. Practice makes perfect, after all. And I've been thinking we should decorate the quad stroller with some subtle Christmas ribbons. Not too much, just a touch of festive flair to announce their arrival. Perfect, Caitlin agreed, her mind already racing with the details of their grand entrance. And I'll need to practice what I'm going to say. I need to find the right words to explain everything to Mark, to prepare him for the shock of his life. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror that night, rehearsing different versions of her revelation, trying to find the perfect balance between honesty and compassion. Mark, meet your daughters. These are Emma, Olivia, Ava, and Sophia, our daughters. Remember those embryos from our fertility treatments? Well, they didn't go to waste. But none of it sounded right. None of the words seemed adequate to convey the magnitude of the situation. How do you tell a man he has 4 children he never knew about for children he never asked for? On Monday, Caitlin returned to her 3rd grade classroom in Greenwich, her mind still preoccupied with the upcoming party and the life-altering revelation she was about to make. Her students were busy making Christmas cards for their families, their faces lit up with holiday cheer. Ms. Thompson, I made this for you. A little girl named Lily handed her a card covered in glitter and adorned with a lopsided drawing of a Christmas tree. Caitlin opened the card to read, Best teacher ever. Merry Christmas. Love, Lily. Thank you, Lily, Caitlin said, her heart swelling with gratitude. This is beautiful. I'll treasure it always. Are you going anywhere for Christmas? Lily asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Yes, Caitlin said, a smile playing on her lips. I'm taking my family to a special Christmas party. It's going to be a very exciting night. Your family? Do you have kids? Lily asked, her eyebrows arching with surprise. Caitlin smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. I do, she said. 4 little girls. 4. Lily's eyes widened even further, her mouth dropping open in astonishment. That's a lot of kids. Are they all big? 4, Caitlin confirmed. And they're all exactly the same age. Can you imagine? Wow, Lily said, shaking her head in disbelief. That's like having a whole class of babies. Can you bring them to our class party? We'd all love to meet them. Not this time, Caitlin said gently, her heart warmed by Lily's innocent enthusiasm. But maybe someday. I'll have to think about it. That evening, as the party drew ever closer, Caitlin laid out her elegant blue dress on her bed, admiring its simple yet sophisticated lines. Next to it, she placed the delicate heart pendant Mark had given her for their 1st anniversary. a symbol of a love that had once seemed so strong and unbreakable. She hadn't worn it since the divorce, but something told her it was the right accessory for the night, a reminder of the past and a symbol of hope for the future. Her phone rang, breaking the spell of her thoughts. It was Dr. Samantha Wells, her former fertility specialist, the woman who had guided her and Mark through the emotional roller coaster of their attempts to conceive. "Caitlin, it's Dr. Wells," the doctor said, her voice warm and professional. "I received an invitation to Mark and Tiffany's party. I was quite surprised to see your name on the guest list, too. I wasn't sure if you were aware that I would be attending." "Yes, I'll be there," Caitlin said, her voice steady. "I'm actually looking forward to it. I just wanted to check if you're okay with that, given your history with them," Dr. Wells said, her tone laced with concern. "I know how difficult the divorce was, and I wouldn't want you to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation." Caitlin took a deep breath, steeling herself for the revelation she was about to share. "Actually, Dr. Wells, I have something to tell you. Something that I think you'll find quite remarkable. Those embryos we created, the ones that Mark seemed to have forgotten about, they worked." There was a long, pregnant pause on the line, filled with unspoken questions and dawning realization. "All four of them," Caitlin continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I have 14-month-old identical quadruplets. For beautiful, healthy little girls." "My God!" Dr. Wells gasped, her voice filled with astonishment. That's medically remarkable. All four embryos implanted successfully, and all four babies are perfectly healthy. It's truly a miracle." "Perfectly healthy," Caitlin confirmed, her heart swelling with pride. "And they'll all be at the party. They're ready to meet their father." Another long pause stretched out on the line, filled with awe and anticipation. "Does Mark know?" Dr. Wells finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet," Caitlin said, a hint of mischief creeping into her tone. "He's in for quite a surprise." "Caitlin, this is going to be quite a revelation," Dr. Wells said, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "It's going to turn his world upside down." "I know," Caitlin said, her voice firm, "but it's time. It's time for him to face the consequences of his actions, to acknowledge the existence of his daughters, to embrace the family he thought he could never have." After hanging up with Dr. Wells, Caitlin checked her suitcase one last time, making sure she had everything she needed for the weekend. Tomorrow, she would drive to Boston, spend 2 precious days with her daughters, and then bring them to Greenwich for the party that would change everything, the party that would rewrite her past and redefine her future. She looked at the completed party outfit hanging on her closet door, the elegant blue dress, the sentimental heart pendant, and the shimmering silver shoes. She felt ready almost. There was still fear, still doubt, still a lingering sense of vulnerability. But when she thought about her daughters, their right to know their father, and yes, maybe the quiet satisfaction of showing Mark what he had walked away from, her resolve strengthened, her determination burned brighter than ever. The time for hiding was over. The time for secrets was past. It was time to step into the light and claim her place in the world, not as Mark Wilson's ex-wife, but as the proud and fiercely protective mother of Emma, Olivia, Ava, and Sophia. The morning of December 24th arrived with tiny snowflakes dancing in the air outside Caitlin's Boston apartment, a picturesque scene that seemed to mirror the swirling emotions inside her. She woke before dawn, her stomach tight with nerves, her mind racing with 1,000 different scenarios. Today was the day everything would change. The day she would finally confront her past and embrace her future. The day she would introduce her daughters to their father. "Good morning, my loves," she said softly as she entered the nursery, her voice filled with tenderness. All 4 girls were already awake, standing in their cribs and babbling to each other in their own secret language, their faces lit up with anticipation. Emma, always the first to notice her, pointed and shouted, "Mama!" The others joined in, their tiny voices a chorus of pure joy, reaching their arms up to be picked up. Caitlin lifted Emma first, showering her with kisses, then Olivia, setting them down gently to play while she got Ava and Sophia, making sure each felt equally loved and cherished. "Today is a very important day," she told them as she changed their diapers one by one, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "You're going to meet your daddy. You're going to meet the man who gave you those beautiful eyes and that adorable little chin." The girls didn't understand the significance of her words, but they smiled at the sound of her voice, their eyes sparkling with innocent curiosity. Caitlin treasured these quiet morning moments with them, knowing that after today, their world would be forever altered, their lives irrevocably intertwined with the man who had once been a stranger. Martha arrived at 9 o'clock, carrying a large, overflowing bag that threatened to burst at the seams. "I brought extra bows in case any fall off," she said, her voice practical and prepared. "And backup tights just in case. And emergency snacks because you never know when a toddler is going to have a meltdown. And a first aid kit, and a portable changing station, and a lifetime supply of baby wipes?" Caitlin laughed, her voice filled with affection. "Martha, we're going to a party, not moving to the moon. I think we're covered." "With 4 toddlers, you need to be prepared for anything?" Martha replied, setting down her bag with a decisive thud. "It's always better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. Have your parents left yet? Are they on their way?" "They're on their way," Caitlin said. "Dad wanted to make sure the minivan had enough gas for the trip. He's been meticulously checking the tire pressure all morning." Caitlin's phone rang, breaking the comfortable rhythm of their preparations. It was Rachel, her voice filled with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. "Are you really doing this today?" Rachel asked without even saying hello, her question hanging in the air like a challenge. "Are you actually going through with this crazy plan?" "Yes," Caitlin said firmly, her voice unwavering. "My parents and Martha are here, helping me with the girls. We're getting them ready now. The dresses are ironed, the bows are in place, the snacks are packed." "I still think this is completely crazy," Rachel said, her tone softening slightly. "But I also think you're the bravest person I know. I admire your strength, your determination, your unwavering commitment to your daughters." "I don't feel brave," Caitlin admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel terrified. I'm scared of what Mark's reaction will be, scared of how Tiffany will respond, scared of the potential fallout. But I know I have to do this. For the girls. Call me the second you leave that party," Rachel said, her voice filled with concern. "I want to hear everything. I want all the details, the good, the bad, and the ugly." At 11 o'clock, Caitlin's parents arrived, their faces beaming with pride and support. Her mother came in carrying several gift bags with colorful tissue paper spilling out from the top, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "I thought the girls should bring presents," she explained, holding up the bags for Caitlin to inspect. "It is a Christmas party, after all. We can't have them arriving empty-handed." "Mom, I don't think that's necessary," Caitlin said, her brow furrowing with concern. "These aren't for Mark or that wife of his," her mother said, waving her hand dismissively. "These are from the girls to the other guests, a little something to spread some holiday cheer. Little candy canes with their names on tags. It's their first Christmas party. They should be good guests." Caitlin smiled at her mother's thoughtfulness, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That's so sweet of you." "Now," her father said, clapping his hands together, his voice filled with enthusiasm, "let's get these little ladies dressed and ready for their big debut. It's showtime." The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of activity, a carefully choreographed dance of diapers, dresses, bows, and baby wipes, bathing 4 toddlers, drying and styling their light brown curls, getting them into clean diapers, perfectly pressed tights, and the matching red velvet dresses was like a carefully orchestrated circus act, requiring the combined skills and patience of all 4 adults. "Emma, please sit still while Grandpa puts." They had been married earlier in life, and eventually found their way into the exclusive neighborhood where Mark now resided with Tiffany. Caitlin parked her car a block away from the massive house. From that vantage point, she had a clear view. The house was 3 stories of stone and glass, festooned with thousands of white lights. Even from a distance, it was clearly a spectacular residence. For the next hour, Caitlin remained in her car, observing the guests as they arrived in expensive cars. Men in tailored suits and women in designer dresses walked up the path to the front entrance, where a valet took their cars and a butler ushered them inside. At 6:30, Dr. Wells arrived, followed by several of Mark's colleagues from Wilson Financial Partners. She recognized David Chun, Mark's business partner, and his wife, Sarah. Caitlin's phone vibrated with a text message from Martha. "Girls are ready," it read. "All happy and fed. Just say when." She took a long, deep breath and replied, "Wait for my next text. Should be around 8 o'clock. At 6:55, Caitlin got out of her car. The snow had stopped falling, but the air was still frigid. She pulled her coat tightly around herself and began walking slowly toward the mansion. With each step she took, her heart beat faster and harder. This was it. After months of meticulous planning, after keeping such a monumental secret, she was about to change everything. She paused at the end of the walkway, gazing up at the house. Through the enormous windows, she could see people mingling, holding glasses of champagne and chatting. Somewhere inside was Mark, the man who had once vowed to love her forever, the man who had left her because she couldn't give him children quickly enough. The irony of the situation was almost too much to bear. Her phone vibrated again. A text from her mother. "We love you," it said. "You are strong enough for this." Those words provided the final surge of strength she needed. Caitlin straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked the remaining distance to the front door. The butler opened the door before she could even ring the bell. "Good evening, madam," he said. "Name, please?" "Caitlin Thompson." He checked the list he held. "Yes, Miss Thompson. Welcome to the Wilson residence." As she stepped into the grand foyer, removing her coat and handing it to a waiting attendant, Caitlin felt eyes turning in her direction. Conversations trailed off. People stared openly. The massive Christmas tree in the entryway towered above her, decorated with gold and crystal ornaments that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She stood perfectly still, taking in the scene, preparing herself for what was about to happen. Then, from across the crowded room, she saw Mark. He was talking to David Chun, holding a glass of scotch in his hand, and he looked exactly as she remembered him. Next to Mark stood Tiffany, wearing a tight red dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile turning icy when she spotted Caitlin. Tiffany leaned close to Mark's ear and whispered something. He turned, and his eyes met Caitlin's across the crowded room. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Tiffany forced a smile and began walking toward her, leaving Mark standing there with a bewildered look on his face. "Caitlin," Tiffany called out, her voice cutting through the noise of the party. "You came. How brave of you." Tiffany air-kissed both of Caitlin's cheeks, her expensive perfume almost overpowering. "You look so well-rested," Tiffany said, her eyes scanning Caitlin's blue dress from head to toe. "I miss those days when I could sleep all night without any responsibilities." "Thank you for inviting me," Caitlin replied calmly. "Your home is beautiful." "Yes, it is," Tiffany smiled. "Mark wanted something special for our family." "Speaking of Mark," she said, waving him over. Mark walked toward them slowly, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He stopped beside Tiffany, barely making eye contact with Caitlin. "Hello, Caitlin," he said stiffly. "Mark," she nodded. "It's been a long time." An awkward silence hung in the air until Tiffany looped her arm through Mark's. "Darling, we should check on the caterers. Caitlin, please enjoy yourself. There's plenty of food for everyone, even those eating alone." With another fake smile, she pulled Mark away. Caitlin stood alone in the crowded room. She noticed people watching her, whispering to each other. She recognized most of them as friends from their country club, Mark's colleagues, and neighbors from their old neighborhood. Many looked away when she caught their eye. She made her way to the bar and asked for a glass of water. As she turned around, she came face to face with Kimberly, a woman who had once been her friend. "Caitlin, I didn't expect to see you here," Kimberly said, her voice betraying surprise. I was invited, Caitlin replied simply. Yes, of course. It's just, well, how have you been? Are you still teaching at the elementary school? I am. That's nice. And you moved right after the divorce? Yes. Anywhere special? Caitlin smiled slightly. Very special, actually. Kimberly looked uncomfortable with Caitlin's calm responses. And are you seeing anyone? It's been 2 years. Surely you've moved on. I've definitely moved on, Caitlin said. Just not in the way people might expect. Before Kimberly could ask any more questions, David Chun approached them. He was Mark's business partner, a tall man with kind eyes who had always treated Caitlin with respect. Caitlin, it's good to see you, he said warmly, extending his hand. You look well. Thank you, David. How have you been? Busy. The firm is growing. Sarah is around here somewhere. She'll be happy to see you. Kimberly excused herself, clearly disappointed not to get more gossip. I'm sorry about all this, David said quietly once they were alone. I don't know why they invited you, but I can guess. It's fine. I'm stronger than I look. You always were, he smiled. Don't let them get to you, especially Tiffany. She's very focused on appearances. I've noticed, Caitlin said. From across the room, she saw Tiffany watching them. Her eyes narrowed. Tiffany whispered something to a staff member, who nodded and left quickly. Moments later, the room's attention shifted as a uniformed nanny appeared, carrying a baby boy in a tiny tuxedo. Everyone, Tiffany called out, her voice projecting over the party noise. Jackson just woke up from his nap and wanted to say hello to all our guests. She took the baby from the nanny, positioning herself and Jackson in the center of the room. Mark moved to stand beside them, completing the picture of the perfect family. Isn't he just the most handsome little man? Tiffany gushed. He looks exactly like his daddy. Guests gathered around, admiring the baby. Caitlin stayed where she was, sipping her water. She checked her phone. Half an hour until she sent her text to Martha. He's quite cute, a familiar voice said beside her. Caitlin turned to see Dr. Samantha Wells, her former fertility specialist. The doctor was watching her intently. Yes, he is, Caitlin agreed. How are you, Caitlin? Really? I'm good, Dr. Wells. Better than good, actually. You seem different. Happier somehow, Dr. Wells observed. Despite the uncomfortable situation, Caitlin smiled. Life has a way of working out exactly as it should. Dr. Wells nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad to hear that. You deserve happiness. Across the room, Tiffany was still showing off Jackson. Being a mother is the most amazing experience, she said loudly enough for Caitlin to hear. It completes you in a way nothing else can. Several women nodded in agreement, a few glancing uncomfortably at Caitlin. Some women just aren't meant to be mothers, though, Tiffany continued, her eyes locking with Caitlin's. And that's just sad for them. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside her, but said nothing to stop his wife's obvious dig. Caitlin's phone vibrated with a text from Martha. Girls are ready, it read. Sophia was fussy, but she's happy now. Just say when. Caitlin typed back. Soon. Stay ready. Ladies and gentlemen, Tiffany announced, while we wait for dinner to be served, I'd love to show you Jackson's nursery. We just had it redesigned by a famous baby room designer from New York. Guests began following Tiffany up the grand staircase. She paused, looking back at Caitlin. Caitlin, you should come too. You can see what a proper nursery looks like. For future reference if that ever happens for you. Several guests looked embarrassed by Tiffany's comment, but most followed her upstairs. Mark handed Jackson back to the nanny and stayed behind, moving to talk with David. Caitlin hesitated, then decided to follow the group upstairs. She wanted to see this nursery that Tiffany was so proud of. The second floor of the mansion was just as impressive as the first. They walked down a wide hallway to a set of double doors, which Tiffany opened with a flourish. Welcome to Jackson's Kingdom, she announced. The nursery was enormous, with hand-painted murals of forests and animals covering the walls. A massive crib with a canopy stood in the center of the room. Custom bookshelves, a rocking chair that looked like a throne, and toys that appeared never to have been played with filled the space. "We imported the crib from Italy," Tiffany explained, "and the murals were painted by an artist who does work for celebrities in Los Angeles. The carpet is from France. It's completely organic and hypoallergenic." "It's very elaborate," one guest commented. "Only the best for our son," Tiffany smiled. "I wanted a space that would nurture his development. That's what good mothers do. They create perfect environments for their children." She looked directly at Caitlin as she said this. Caitlin stayed near the doorway, thinking of her daughter's simple but cozy room in Boston. Their 4 cribs arranged in a row, walls painted a soft yellow, stuffed animals they actually played with, and books they loved to hear again and again. "Some children don't need imported cribs to be happy," Caitlin said quietly but loud enough for Tiffany to hear. Tiffany's smile tightened. "Well, some children have parents who can provide the best of everything. Others don't." Dr. Wells, who had followed the group upstairs, moved to stand beside Caitlin. "I found that children need love more than expensive furniture," she said. "Of course," Tiffany replied dismissively. "But why not give them both? Unless you can't, which is just unfortunate." The nanny appeared at the door. "Mrs. Wilson, dinner is ready to be served." "Thank you, Melissa. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we head downstairs? I've arranged a special 5-course meal prepared by a chef who trained in Paris." As the guests filed out, Caitlin lingered in the nursery doorway. She took out her phone and sent a text to Martha. "Be ready in 30 minutes. Martha responded immediately. "We're parked 1 block away. Girls are perfect. Good luck." Caitlin took a deep breath and followed the other guests downstairs to the dining room. A long table had been set with crystal, silver, and fine china. Name cards marked each person's place. Caitlin found her seat directly across from Mark and Tiffany. She sat down, placing her phone next to her plate where she could easily see it. "Welcome to the formal part of our evening," Tiffany announced as everyone was seated. "Mark and I are so pleased to have you all here to celebrate the holidays with our family." She emphasized the word family while looking pointedly at Caitlin. Mark stared at his plate, his discomfort obvious. The first course arrived, a delicate soup served in expensive-looking bowls. As everyone began to eat, Tiffany continued her performance. "So, Caitlin," she said sweetly, "are you still at that same elementary school?" "Yes," Caitlin replied. "I love teaching." "How nice. It must be so fulfilling to teach other people's children, especially since." Tiffany let her words trail off meaningfully. David Chin intervened. "Caitlin, I heard you were named Teacher of the Year last spring. That's quite an achievement." "Thank you, David. Yes, it was unexpected, but very nice." "Achievements are important," Tiffany jumped in, "but nothing compares to the achievement of creating life. Don't you agree, Mark?" Mark looked up, clearly uncomfortable. "I think different people find fulfillment in different ways," he said carefully. "Of course," Tiffany smiled. "Some people just have more options than others." As the second course was served, Caitlin checked her phone again. 20 more minutes. The dinner continued, with Tiffany making increasingly obvious digs at Caitlin's childless status. Each time, Caitlin remained calm, knowing what was coming. When dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate creation, Tiffany stood up with her champagne glass. "Before we enjoy this delicious dessert, I'd like to make a toast," she announced. "To family, the greatest blessing of all. I feel so fortunate to have our complete family here in our home." She paused, looking directly at Caitlin. "It must be so sad spending Christmas all alone, Caitlin. Don't worry. Maybe one day you'll finally have the family you always wanted but couldn't have with Mark." Uncomfortable laughter filled the room. Several guests looked down at their plates. David started to object, but before he could speak, Caitlin's phone vibrated with a text. She looked at it, took a deep breath, and stood up with newfound confidence. Caitlin smiled as she stood, her heart racing, but her voice steady. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. "Actually, Tiffany," she said calmly. I'd like everyone to meet my family now. Confused murmurs spread through the room. Tiffany laughed, the sound high and forced. Your family? What family? Your cat? She looked around, expecting others to laugh with her. Caitlin kept her eyes on Tiffany as she spoke. No, not a cat. My children. The murmurs grew louder. Mark set down his champagne glass, his eyebrows furrowing. What are you talking about? He asked. The first direct question he'd addressed to her all evening. Before Caitlin could answer, the doorbell rang. The clear sound cut through the confused chatter, silencing everyone again. Tiffany looked irritated. Who could that be? We're in the middle of dinner. A staff member appeared at the dining room entrance. Mrs. Wilson. There's someone at the door who says they're expected. I didn't invite anyone else, Tiffany snapped. I did, Caitlin said. She turned to the staff member. Please show them in. Tiffany stood up, her face flushed. This is my home. You don't give instructions to my staff. It's important, Caitlin said, still calm. Please. Mark nodded to the staff member. Let them in, James. James disappeared, and the room remained silent. Seconds later, the sound of wheels rolling across the marble flooring reached them. Martha appeared in the doorway, pushing a custom-made quad stroller. Inside were 4 identical toddler girls dressed in matching red velvet Christmas dresses with white bows in their hair. The silence in the room deepened. Every guest stared at the 4 little faces peering curiously from the stroller. What is this? Tiffany demanded, her voice shrill. Caitlin walked over to her daughters. Emma reached up immediately, recognizing her mother. Caitlin lifted her into her arms. This is Emma, she said, her voice clear in the silent room. She pointed to each of the others. And these are Olivia, Ava, and Sophia, my quadruplets. She turned to face Mark directly. Our quadruplets. Mark's face drained of color as he stared at the girls. In each identical face, his own features were unmistakable. His eyes, his chin, even the small dimple in their left cheeks when they smiled. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. That's not possible. It is possible, Caitlin said. They were born from the embryos we created during our marriage. Our divorce agreement gave me legal rights to use them. I didn't tell you because, well, you made it clear you didn't want a family with me. The champagne glass slipped from Tiffany's hand, shattering on the marble floor. No one moved to clean it up. All eyes were fixed on the 4 little girls. You had no right, Tiffany stammered, her perfect composure crumbling. That's not. You can't just. Dr. Wells stood up from her seat and approached the stroller. Her professional interest was obvious as she looked at the 4 healthy, identical girls. Quadruplets from frozen embryos, she said, her voice filled with awe. The medical odds against this are astronomical. All 4 embryos implanted successfully, and all 4 babies are perfectly healthy. This is remarkable. Martha beamed proudly. They were born at 34 weeks, 5 pounds each. No complications. 5 pounds each for quads is excellent. Dr. Wells nodded. Caitlin, you carried all 4 to 34 weeks? Yes, Caitlin said, bouncing Emma gently in her arms. It wasn't easy, but it was worth every minute. Guests began whispering to each other, some pointing between Mark and the girls, noting the undeniable resemblance. They have your eyes, Mark, David Chun said, breaking the tension. And your mother's nose, another guest added. Mark remained frozen, staring at his daughters. He seemed unable to process what was happening. Tiffany found her voice again. This is ridiculous. You bring these children to our Christmas party. For what purpose? To ruin our evening? No, Caitlin said. I brought them because it's Christmas, and they deserve to know their father, and he deserves to know them. Sophia began fussing in the stroller. Martha lifted her out, calming her immediately. There, sweet girl. It's just a lot of new faces. One of the female guests approached the stroller, peering at Ava and Olivia. They're absolutely beautiful. How old are they? 14 months, Caitlin replied. The woman's eyes widened as she did the math. So, you were pregnant while Mark married Tiffany. Caitlin finished. Yes. I was carrying quadruplets while they were having their wedding. This revelation sent another wave of whispers through the room. Tiffany's face reddened further. Get out! She hissed at Caitlin. Get out of my house right now. Mark finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. No. Tiffany turned to him. What did you say? I said no. He repeated, louder this time. These are, if what Caitlin says is true, these are my daughters. He stood up slowly and walked around the table toward the stroller. The room watched in silence as he approached the little girls. Olivia looked up at him curiously, while Ava gave him a toothy smile. May I? He asked Caitlin, gesturing toward Olivia. Caitlin nodded. Martha helped lift Olivia from the stroller and placed her in Mark's arms. He held her awkwardly, clearly unpracticed with children despite having a son. Olivia studied his face seriously, then reached out to touch his cheek. The simple gesture seemed to break something in Mark. His eyes filled with tears. She has my mother's expression, he said softly. That serious look. Tiffany watched this interaction with growing horror. Mark, put that child down. This is clearly some kind of trick. It's not a trick, Dr. Wells said firmly. Look at them, Tiffany. The genetic resemblance is undeniable. These are Mark's daughters. I want a DNA test, Tiffany demanded. Fine, Caitlin agreed. But it won't change the truth. These are our daughters, Mark's and mine, created when we were trying so hard to become parents. Several guests began shifting uncomfortably, sensing they were witnessing an intensely private moment. I think we should go, one woman said, nudging her husband. No, stay, Tiffany commanded, trying to regain control of her party. This situation can be handled privately. There's no need to end our evening. But more guests were already making excuses, gathering their things. Some approached the stroller first, unable to resist seeing the 4 identical little girls who had just changed everything. David Chen's wife, Sarah, was among the first to reach out to Caitlin. They're beautiful, she said sincerely. All of them. Thank you, Caitlin replied. David joined his wife, looking between Mark and the children. Those are definitely Wilson girls, he said. They have the distinctive Wilson chin. Mark was still holding Olivia, who had now grabbed his tie and was playing with it contentedly. He looked completely overwhelmed. Why didn't you tell me? He asked Caitlin quietly. Would you have cared? She responded. You left because I couldn't give you children fast enough. But I never gave up on being a mother. Before Mark could answer, Tiffany grabbed his arm. Put that child down, Mark. We need to talk privately. Mark hesitated, then gently handed Olivia back to Martha. I think we do need to talk, he said to Caitlin. About the girls, about everything. Of course, Caitlin agreed. We should talk about how we move forward from here. Move forward, Tiffany nearly shrieked. There's nothing to move forward with. These aren't Mark's responsibility. Actually, Dr. Wells interjected. Legally and biologically, they are his children. The fact that Caitlin used the embryos without his knowledge doesn't change the genetic reality. Tiffany's composure broke completely. This is absurd. All of it. I will not stand here and let this woman destroy our family. She stormed out of the dining room, her red dress disappearing up the staircase. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the house. The remaining guests looked at each other awkwardly. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, David suggested to Mark. Mark nodded, still staring at the 4 little girls. Yes, my office would be better. He looked at Caitlin. Would you mind bringing one of them with us? I'd like to get to know them. Of course, Caitlin said. She handed Emma to Martha and lifted Sophia from the stroller. Sophia is the calmest. She might be the best for a quiet talk. As they turned to leave the dining room, Dr. Wells stepped forward. Caitlin, I'd love to know more about your pregnancy and their birth. From a medical perspective, it's fascinating. I'd be happy to tell you everything, Caitlin said. Maybe we could talk tomorrow. I'll call you, Dr. Wells promised. The dinner party had completely dissolved. As Caitlin followed Mark toward his office with Sophia in her arms, she noticed several guests were helping Martha with the other girls, admiring them and asking questions. The atmosphere had transformed from Tiffany's carefully orchestrated showcase into something entirely different. Mark opened the door to his office and motioned for Caitlin to enter. As the door closed behind them, he looked at Sophia with a mixture of wonder and fear. "I have daughters," he said, as if saying it aloud might help him believe it. "For daughters I never knew about." Sophia reached for Mark's face, her tiny fingers brushing against his cheek. Her touch seemed to snap him out of his shock. He stepped back, moving to sit behind his large desk. "How could you do this without telling me?" he asked, his voice tight with anger. "I had a right to know." Caitlin sat in the chair opposite him, adjusting Sophia on her lap. "Did you? You left me because I couldn't give you children fast enough. You made it very clear what you wanted." "That's not fair. We tried for years." "5 years," Caitlin interrupted. "And then you quit. You walked away when it got hard." Mark ran his hands through his hair. "So this was revenge, getting pregnant with our embryos without telling me?" "No," Caitlin said firmly. "This was me becoming a mother. The mother I always wanted to be." She looked down at Sophia, who was playing with the heart pendant around her neck. "I used the embryos because they were mine too. The divorce agreement gave me legal rights to them." "I never thought you'd actually use them," Mark admitted. "You never asked. You were too busy starting your new life with Tiffany." Mark was silent for a beat, his eyes fixed on Sophia. "For babies," he finally said, a hint of awe in his voice. "You carried and delivered for babies all by yourself." "I wasn't by myself," Caitlin gently corrected him. "I had help. My parents moved here from Arizona. I hired Martha. My neighbors back in Boston even organized a meal train after the girls were born." "Boston? That's where you've been living all this time?" Caitlin nodded. "I bought a small house there, close to a good school. It's nothing like this mansion, but it's home." Mark leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Tell me about them. Tell me about the girls." For the first time since she'd walked into his opulent office, a genuine smile lit up Caitlin's face. "They're amazing. So different even though they look identical." She gave Sophia a gentle bounce. "Sophia here is our little peacemaker. She's calm, thoughtful. Emma is the leader, always the first one to try something new. Olivia watches everything, takes it all in. And Ava is our comedian, always making the funniest faces." "Are they healthy?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Perfectly healthy. They were born at 34 weeks, which Dr. Wells says is remarkable for quadruplets." "And you? The pregnancy must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," Caitlin admitted. "I was on bed rest for the last 10 weeks, but it was worth every single moment." Before Mark could respond, the office door flew open. Tiffany stood there, her face a carefully constructed mask, but her eyes blazed with barely contained anger. She'd clearly touched up her makeup and straightened her vibrant red dress, desperately trying to regain her picture-perfect appearance. "Mark, we need to discuss this situation. Right now," she demanded, her tone sharp and unforgiving. She barely even glanced at Sophia. "I want these people out of our house." "Tiffany," Mark said quietly, a warning in his voice. "These are my daughters. You don't know that for sure. She could be lying." "Look at them, Tiffany," Mark countered. "They have my eyes, my mother's nose. They're Wilsons." Tiffany's carefully constructed composure began to crumble again, cracks forming in her perfect facade. "So what? She did this without even asking you. She trapped you." "Trapped him into what?" Caitlin asked, her voice steady and even. "I've never asked Mark for anything. Not child support, not involvement, nothing. I came here tonight because I thought my daughters deserved to know their father, and he deserved to know them." "You came here to humiliate me," Tiffany snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "To ruin my perfect party." "The party was your idea, Tiffany," Caitlin reminded her calmly. You invited me to show me what I couldn't have. Not for this ambush. Mark stood up abruptly, his frustration evident. Enough, Tiffany. This isn't helping. Tiffany rounded on him, her anger now directed at him. Aren't you angry? She kept your children from you for over a year. Yes, I'm angry, Mark admitted, his voice laced with confusion and shock. And confused. But yelling isn't going to change anything. So, what do you suggest? Tiffany demanded, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. That we welcome these children into our lives? That we pretend this is normal? I don't know yet, Mark confessed, running a hand through his hair. But they're my daughters. I can't just ignore that fact. Tiffany's voice rose in pitch. What about Jackson? What about our son? How will this affect him? Outside in the main living room, Martha was introducing the other 3 girls to the remaining party guests. Emma had already charmed everyone with her confident personality, toddling between the adults and flashing them her winning smile. Olivia sat quietly in David Chen's wife's lap, observing everything with her serious, intelligent eyes. Ava, true to form, was entertaining a small group by making silly faces and giggling. Dr. Wells was explaining the medical rarity of healthy quadruplets to a captivated audience. The fact that all 4 embryos implanted successfully is unusual enough, she said, her voice filled with professional admiration. But for all 4 babies to be born healthy, and for Caitlin to carry them to 34 weeks, it's truly remarkable. She did this alone? One woman asked, her eyebrows raised in astonishment. While Mark was married to Tiffany, she had support, Dr. Wells said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. And medically speaking, what she accomplished is nothing short of extraordinary. A man in an expensive suit frowned. But wasn't it wrong to use those embryos without telling Mark? Legally, she had every right, Dr. Wells replied, her gaze unwavering. And morally? Well, Mark made his choices when he left Caitlin. She made hers. Nearby, David Chun could hear the increasingly heated voices coming from Mark's office. He excused himself from his conversation and walked toward the closed door, a worried expression on his face. Inside the office, Tiffany's voice had reached a near shriek. I will not let her destroy what we have. I will not let these children interfere with our family. These children are part of our family now, Mark retorted, his own voice rising to match hers. Part of our family? Tiffany laughed, the sound harsh and brittle. You barely have time for Jackson. You're always working, always at the office. Now you suddenly want to be father of the year to 4 more kids. Sophia, startled by the loud voices, began to cry. Caitlin stood up, bouncing her gently in an attempt to soothe her. I should go, she said, her voice laced with concern. This is too much for her. No, Mark said quickly, his voice pleading. Please don't leave yet. We need to figure this out. Just then, a knock sounded at the door, and David Chun stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation. Everything okay in here? He asked, taking in the tense scene. We could hear you all the way in the living room. Tiffany turned away, crossing her arms defensively over her chest. Mark looked visibly embarrassed. Sorry about that, David, he said, offering a weak smile. We're just processing. David's gaze softened as he looked at baby Sophia, who was still whimpering softly. Maybe we should focus on what's best for the children here. All of them. Exactly what I was saying. Tiffany chimed in, seizing the opportunity. What's best for Jackson is not having his life disrupted by this situation. I meant all 5 children, Tiffany, David clarified, his gaze firm. Jackson and the quadruplets. Tiffany glared at him, her eyes narrowed. This isn't your business, David. Maybe not, he conceded. But as Mark's friend and business partner, I care about what happens next. He turned to Caitlin, his expression sincere. Your daughters are wonderful. Martha is showing them off out there, and they're charming the whole room. Thank you, Caitlin said, managing a small smile as Sophia began to calm down in her arms. David turned back to Mark, his voice serious. Whatever else happens tonight, you need to handle this with dignity. Those girls deserve to know their father, even if you weren't there from the beginning. Mark nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. You're right. Tiffany made a disgusted sound in the back of her throat. I can't believe you're all acting like this is normal. Like she didn't deliberately humiliate us in front of everyone we know. I plan to introduce my daughters to their father, Caitlin said calmly, her voice unwavering. The timing was your choice, Tiffany. You invited me to your party. To show you what you couldn't have, Tiffany repeated, her voice breaking slightly. And instead I showed you what I do have, Caitlin replied. Tiffany stared at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she turned to Mark, her voice brittle. I'm going to check on Jackson. When I come back, I expect these people to be gone. She stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her with a resounding bang. I'm sorry about that, Mark said after she left, his voice filled with regret. Don't apologize for her, David told him firmly. Focus on what matters now. Mark looked at Sophia, who had finally calmed down and was now sleepily resting her head on Caitlin's shoulder. They matter, he said softly, his eyes filled with a newfound realization. My daughters matter. David nodded in agreement. I'll give you some privacy to work things out. He left the office, closing the door quietly behind him, leaving Caitlin and Mark alone. Mark stood up and walked around his desk, his gaze fixed on Sophia. May I? He asked tentatively, holding out his arms towards her. Caitlin carefully transferred the sleepy toddler to him. This time, Mark held her more confidently, cradling her head against his shoulder. She's falling asleep, he whispered, his voice filled with awe. It's past their bedtime, Caitlin explained. They're usually asleep by 7:30. Mark gently stroked Sophia's back, his eyes filled with regret. I've missed so much already. You didn't know, Caitlin pointed out gently. Because you didn't tell me. Caitlin sighed, her expression tinged with sadness. Mark, what would you have done if I had told you? If I had called you up the moment I found out I was pregnant with quadruplets? Mark was silent for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. I don't know, he finally admitted, his voice barely audible. But I should have had the chance to decide. You made your decision when you left me, Mark, Caitlin said, her voice laced with a hint of bitterness. When you moved on so quickly with Tiffany. When you started a new family without even looking back. That's not fair, is it? You wanted children so badly that you left me to find someone who could give them to you faster. And then you forgot all about the embryos we created together. Mark looked down at Sophia, who was sleeping peacefully in his arms. I made mistakes, he said quietly, his voice filled with remorse. But these girls are innocent. They shouldn't have to pay for my mistakes. I agree, Caitlin said, her voice softening. That's why I'm here. That's why, despite everything, I brought them to meet you. Mark met her eyes, his gaze searching. What happens now, Caitlin? Where do we go from here? Now? Caitlin said, her voice steady as she looked at Mark, cradling Sophia in his arms. We figure out what's best for the girls. Mark nodded slowly, still gazing at the sleeping toddler in his arms. I want to be a part of their lives. I'm glad, Caitlin replied, a flicker of hope in her eyes. They deserve to know their father. We need to discuss details. Visitation, support, everything. Mark gently shifted Sophia to a more comfortable position. But maybe tonight isn't the best time. I think we should talk tomorrow when things are calmer. I agree, Caitlin said. I should get the girls home. It's way past their bedtime. Together, they walked out of the office, Mark still carefully carrying Sophia. In the main living room, the remaining party guests had formed a circle around Martha and the other three girls. Emma was, as usual, the center of attention, walking confidently between the guests, while Olivia observed everyone quietly from Martha's lap. Ava was giggling as David's wife, Sarah, played peekaboo with her. As Caitlin and Mark appeared with Sophia, the conversations paused, and all eyes turned toward them. Everyone looked at Mark, eager to gauge his reaction. Everything okay? David asked, stepping forward, his expression concerned. Yes, Mark said, his voice stronger now, filled with a newfound resolve. Just a lot to process. A woman who had been one of Tiffany's closest friends approached Caitlin, her face softening with genuine warmth. "They're absolutely beautiful," she said. "You must be so proud." "I am," Caitlin smiled, her heart swelling with love for her daughters. "Thank you. How do you even manage 4 babies at once?" another guest asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "I can barely handle my one son." Martha spoke up from where she sat with Olivia, her voice calm and reassuring. "It takes organization and lots of help. We have systems for everything." "Martha has been a lifesaver," Caitlin added gratefully. "She's a retired nurse who helps me part-time. And your parents moved from Arizona to help too, right?" Martha said, nodding in support. Dr. Wells, who had been examining Ava with professional interest, looked up. "The medical odds against a successful quadruplet pregnancy are extraordinary. Caitlin, you must have been on strict bed rest for the last 10 weeks. Caitlin confirmed with a smile. "My school was wonderful about it. They arranged for a long-term substitute and held my job." "You're still teaching 3rd grade? asked a woman who had once been in Caitlin's book club. "Yes, I love it. The girls go to a daycare near the school 3 days a week, and Martha watches them the other 2 days. As Caitlin talked, Mark stood quietly, still holding Sophia, his gaze shifting from one daughter to the other as if trying to memorize their faces, to imprint them on his memory. Emma noticed him and toddled over, grabbing his pant leg to steady herself. She looked up at him curiously. "Hello?" Mark said softly to her, his voice filled with tenderness. I'm your dad." Emma smiled, revealing her tiny white teeth. "Duh," she said matter-of-factly. Mark looked at Caitlin, his eyes wide with surprise. "Does she?" Caitlin shook her head, a smile playing on her lips. "No, she doesn't know what dad means yet. She's just repeating the sound." Mark knelt down carefully, still holding Sophia, to get closer to Emma's level. "I'm your dad," he repeated, his voice gentle. "And I'm very happy to meet you." Emma patted his knee, then turned and wobbled back to Martha, apparently satisfied with her investigation. Caitlin watched this interaction with mixed emotions. For months, she had imagined this moment, but the reality was far more complicated than she had ever expected. A staff member approached Mark hesitantly, his expression apologetic. "Mr. Wilson, several guests are asking if they should leave, and Mrs. Wilson. She's locked herself in the master bedroom with Jackson. She says she won't come down." Mark sighed, running a hand wearily through his hair. "Thank you, James. Please tell the guests they're welcome to stay, but I understand if they prefer to go." Several people were already gathering their coats, eager to escape the unfolding drama. Others, however, seemed reluctant to leave, drawn in by the unexpected turn of events. Dr. Wells approached Caitlin, her eyes gleaming with professional interest. "I'd like to continue our conversation about the girls' development. Would it be possible for me to visit you sometime soon? Professionally, I'm fascinated by their case." "Of course," Caitlin agreed, pleased by her genuine interest. "I'd appreciate your input. Actually, they're due for their next checkup soon." "Excellent. Here's my card with my cell number. Call me anytime." David and Sarah Chun joined them, their faces filled with sympathy. "Caitlin, we were thinking of heading out," Sarah said. "But we'd love to continue celebrating somewhere else. Maybe at your place if it's not too imposing." "That's very kind of you," Caitlin smiled, touched by their support. "But I really need to get the girls to bed. Another time, I hope." "Absolutely," David agreed warmly. He turned to Mark, his voice laced with concern. "You okay, buddy?" Mark nodded slowly. "I will be." He glanced upstairs toward the master bedroom, his brow furrowed with worry. "I need to check on Tiffany at some point. This has been quite a shock for her, too." "For all of us," David said, his voice filled with understanding. "But especially you. Call me tomorrow if you need to talk." Caitlin began gathering the diaper bags and the girls' coats, preparing for their departure. "Martha, we should get them home," she said, her voice laced with exhaustion. "I'll help," Sarah offered, picking up Ava, her expression softening with affection. She's so light. 5 months ago, she was barely 15 pounds, Caitlin said, her voice filled with wonder. They've all grown so fast. Mark was still holding Sophia, who remained asleep against his shoulder, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding around her. Caitlin, he said quietly, his voice filled with a mix of emotions. Before you go, I need your address and phone number. Of course, she said, relief washing over her. She wrote both on a business card and handed it to him. We're in Brooklyn, near the elementary school there. That's a good area, Mark nodded, making a mental note. I'd like to call you tomorrow to discuss everything. I'd appreciate that, Caitlin said, meeting his gaze. I also want to help financially, Mark added, his voice sincere. They're my responsibility, too. Caitlin neither accepted nor rejected his offer, her expression carefully neutral. We can discuss all of that tomorrow. Tonight has been overwhelming enough. Mark looked down at the sleeping Sophia, his heart aching with a mix of guilt and newfound love. Reluctantly, he handed her back to Caitlin. Thank you for bringing them, he said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. For letting me meet them. It was time, Caitlin replied simply, her gaze unwavering. Martha had packed up the quad stroller and was waiting by the door with Emma, Olivia, and Ava, who were starting to fuss from tiredness, sensing the shift in energy. Mark helped Caitlin put Sophia's coat on without waking her. His movements awkward but gentle, a tenderness he hadn't expressed in years. Would you have ever told me about them? He asked suddenly, the question that had been weighing heavily on his mind all night. Caitlin looked at him for a long moment, weighing her words carefully. I hadn't decided yet, she said honestly, her voice barely a whisper. I thought about it every day. Mark nodded, accepting her answer without argument. I'll call you tomorrow around 10. That would be fine. The remaining guests watched as Mark walked Caitlin and Martha to the door, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. A few followed them out, including the Chens and Dr. Wells, while others made their excuses to Mark and hurried away, eager to escape the uncomfortable atmosphere. Quite an evening, one man said awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Thank you for dinner. Outside, the night air was cold and clear, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil within the mansion. The snow had finally stopped, leaving a thin white blanket over the manicured lawns of Greenwich, creating a scene of serene beauty against the backdrop of the dramatic evening. I parked down the block, Caitlin told Martha, her voice filled with weariness. Can you manage the stroller that far? Of course, Martha assured her, her tone confident. The wheels handle the snow just fine. Dr. Wells helped settle the girls into the stroller, ensuring they were snug and comfortable, while Sarah Chun helped Caitlin with the heavy diaper bags. You were amazing in there, Sarah whispered to Caitlin, her voice filled with admiration. So dignified. I would have been a wreck. Thank you, Caitlin said, managing a small smile. I'm shaking inside, but I didn't want the girls to sense any tension. They seem perfectly content, Dr. Wells observed, her professional eye noting their calm demeanor. Remarkably well-adjusted, considering everything. Mark stood in the doorway, watching them prepare to leave, his expression a mixture of longing and regret. He seemed torn, glancing between Caitlin and the upstairs window where Tiffany remained hidden, locked away in her anger and disappointment. Goodbye, Mark, Caitlin said, her voice gentle. Talk to you tomorrow. Goodbye, he replied, his voice barely audible. Drive safely. As they made their way down the block to Caitlin's car, more guests emerged from the mansion, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and fascination. Some nodded to Caitlin as they passed, offering silent words of support, while others avoided eye contact, too uncomfortable to acknowledge the unfolding drama. Well, Martha said as they reached the car, her voice filled with understatement. That was certainly an eventful evening. That's one word for it, Caitlin agreed, her voice laced with exhaustion. They carefully transferred the girls from the stroller to their individual car seats, ensuring they were secure for the drive. Emma and Ava were already dozing, succumbing to the exhaustion of the long day, while Olivia watched with heavy eyes, fighting sleep. Sophia remained sound asleep, her tiny body limp and relaxed. "Do you think he'll really call tomorrow?" Martha asked as she folded the stroller, expertly maneuvering it to fit into the trunk of the car. "Yes," Caitlin said, her voice filled with a newfound certainty. "I do. Mark has many faults, but once he commits to something, he follows through." "And Tiffany, what do you think she'll do?" Martha asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Caitlin sighed, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. "I don't know. Nothing good, I imagine." Dr. Wells approached before getting into her own car, her expression thoughtful. "Caitlin, I meant what I said. I'd love to check the girls over professionally, and I'm incredibly proud of you. What you did tonight took a tremendous amount of courage." "Thank you, Dr. Wells. Call me Samantha, please, and call me tomorrow after you speak with Mark. I'd like to know how he's processing all of this." The drive back to Boston was quiet, the silence broken only by the soft sounds of the girls sleeping soundly in their car seats. Martha followed close behind in her own car, her presence a comforting reassurance. Caitlin's mind raced with thoughts about the evening, replaying the events over and over in her head. Mark's initial shock, Tiffany's barely contained anger, the guests' varied reactions. It was all a blur of heightened emotions and unexpected revelations. She hadn't expected to feel anything from Mark after all this time, but seeing him hold Sophia so tenderly had stirred up complicated emotions, a confusing mixture of the past and the present. Not love or longing, but a sad understanding of what might have been if things had been different, if he had been more patient, if he had stayed. By the time they reached Caitlin's modest house in Brooklyn, it was nearly 11 o'clock. Her parents were waiting up, their faces etched with worry, eager to hear every detail of the dramatic evening. "How did it go?" her mother asked anxiously as they carefully carried the sleeping girls inside, their movements slow and deliberate to avoid waking them. "Exactly as dramatic as you'd expect," Caitlin replied, her voice laced with a mixture of exhaustion and wry amusement. Mark was shocked. Tiffany was furious. The party guests didn't know where to look. "And Mark, what did he say about the girls?" her father asked, his eyes filled with concern. "He wants to be involved. He's calling tomorrow to discuss the details." Her father helped Martha bring in the unwieldy stroller, maneuvering it through the narrow doorway. "Is that good news or bad news?" "I'm not sure yet," Caitlin admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the girls deserve to know their father. That's why I did this." They settled the quadruplets into their cribs without waking them, a minor miracle after such an eventful evening, a testament to their quiet efficiency and the girls' utter exhaustion. "You did the right thing," her father said, squeezing her shoulder reassuringly, his eyes filled with love and support. "No matter what happens next." "I hope so," Caitlin whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation as she looked at her sleeping daughters, her heart overflowing with love and protectiveness. "I really hope so." The morning after the party, Caitlin woke early, her mind already racing despite their late night. She tiptoed into the nursery to check on her daughters, who were still sleeping soundly, their faces peaceful and serene. As she gazed at their innocent faces, her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the tranquility of the morning. A text from Rachel, her best friend, heralding the storm to come. "Call me immediately." Caitlin slipped quietly out of the nursery and into the kitchen, where her mother was already making coffee, the aroma filling the air with a sense of comforting normalcy. "Rachel?" her mother guessed, seeing the phone in her hand, her brow furrowed with concern. Caitlin nodded, a wry smile playing on her lips. "News travels fast." "Go ahead," her mother said, waving her towards the living room. "I'll listen for the girls." Rachel answered on the first ring, her voice filled with excitement and barely contained curiosity. "Caitlin, I've gotten 7 texts already. People are saying you showed up at Mark's party with secret quadruplets. Is that true? What happened?" "It's all true," Caitlin confirmed, settling into a chair, bracing herself for the inevitable deluge of questions. "I brought the girls to the party. And, Don't leave me hanging. What did Mark do? What did Tiffany do? Spill. Mark was shocked, of course, but he wants to be involved with the girls. Tiffany? Caitlin sighed, the memory of the previous night still fresh in her mind. She didn't take it well. I can imagine. Rachel said everyone saying she locked herself in her bedroom and refused to come down. That's true, too. I can't believe you actually did it, Rachel exclaimed, her voice filled with awe and admiration. You walked into that mansion with 4 babies and just changed everything. It was time, Rachel, Caitlin said simply. As Caitlin recounted the events of the night to Rachel, Mark Wilson sat alone in his home office, staring at the business card with Caitlin's address. The stark white rectangle, a symbol of the life he had unknowingly missed. He hadn't slept all night, his mind replaying the events of the disastrous party. The shock, the anger, the overwhelming sense of loss. When the last guest had finally left, bringing an end to the excruciating evening, he'd gone upstairs to find Tiffany, hoping to salvage what was left of their relationship. She was sitting on their bed, still in her vibrant red dress, her posture rigid, her mascara streaking her face, a testament to her raw pain and anger. Is she gone? Tiffany had demanded, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Yes, everyone's gone, Mark had replied, his own voice filled with exhaustion. How could you let her humiliate me like that? Tiffany's voice had risen with each word, her anger finally bubbling to the surface. In our home, in front of all our friends? This isn't about you, Tiffany, Mark had said tiredly, running a hand wearily through his hair. I just found out I have 4 daughters I never even knew existed. Exactly. She has them secret from you. She trapped you. No one is trapped, Mark had said firmly, his voice filled with resolve. She hasn't asked me for anything. Tiffany had stood up then, her face contorted with a mixture of anger and resentment. She hasn't asked for anything yet, but she will. She'll want money and time, and she'll use those children to pull you away from Jackson and me. They're my children too, Tiffany, Mark had countered, his voice pleading. My daughters. You have 1 child, Jackson. Your son, the one I gave you. Mark had shaken his head slowly, his heart aching with a mixture of guilt and a burgeoning sense of responsibility. That's not how it works. I can't just ignore 4 little girls who share my DNA. Of course you can. People do it all the time, Tiffany had retorted, her voice filled with bitterness. I won't, Mark had said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. I won't abandon my daughters. Tiffany had stared at him for a long moment, her eyes narrowed, her expression cold and calculating. If you pursue this, if you get involved with those children, our marriage is over. Don't threaten me, Tiffany, Mark had warned quietly, his voice laced with a hint of steel. It's not a threat. It's a fact. I will not share my husband with that woman and her babies. With my babies, Mark had corrected her, his voice filled with a newfound protectiveness. And no one is asking you to share anything. I'm simply going to be a father to my children. All 5 of them? Tiffany had laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and brittle. You barely have time for Jackson as it is. That comment had hit Mark hard, striking at his deepest insecurities. He'd left Tiffany alone after that, unable to bridge the chasm that had suddenly opened between them, spending the night in his office, haunted by the photos of the quadruplets he'd secretly taken on his phone during the party. Their innocent faces a constant reminder of his past mistakes and his present responsibilities. Now, at 9:45 in the morning, he picked up his phone, his hand trembling slightly, and dialed Caitlin's number, his heart pounding in his chest. Caitlin had just finished feeding the girls breakfast when her phone rang, the sound cutting through the morning chaos. She saw Mark's name on the screen, her heart leaping into her throat, and took a deep breath, bracing herself for the conversation to come, before answering. Hello, Mark. Caitlin, good morning, he said, his voice tentative, filled with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. I'm calling, as we discussed. Yes, thank you, Caitlin replied, her voice carefully neutral. There was an awkward pause, the silence filled with unspoken emotions and unresolved issues. I'd like to see the girls, Mark said finally. his voice barely above a whisper. Today, if possible. I know it's soon, but... Today is fine, Caitlin interrupted, with a little of her warmth that Mark remembered. We're home all day. My parents are here and Martha is coming at noon. Is it okay if I come around 10:30? I have the address you gave me. That works. See you then. After hanging up, Caitlin turned to her mother, her expression a mixture of apprehension and determination. Mark is coming here at 10:30. Her mother's eyebrows rose in surprise. That soon. Is that good or bad? I don't know, Caitlin admitted, her voice filled with uncertainty. But we need to talk to figure things out. Do you want your father and me to take the girls out? Give you some space? Her mother offered, her voice filled with concern. Caitlin shook her head. No, he's coming to see them. To see the girls, but maybe you could stay close. Just in case, she added, a hint of anxiety creeping into her voice. At exactly 10:30, a sleek black car pulled up in front of Caitlin's modest Brooklyn home, its polished exterior a stark contrast to the cozy, unassuming house. Mark stepped out, looking tired but determined, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He was carrying 4 identical gift bags, each one carefully chosen, a tangible symbol of his desire to connect with the daughters he had never known. Caitlin opened the door before he could even knock, her heart pounding in her chest. Hello, Mark. Caitlin. He nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment, before shifting past her, drawn by an irresistible force, towards the sound of his daughters. Are they in the living room? Yes, in the living room, she said, stepping aside to let him in. They just finished breakfast. Mark entered cautiously, as if stepping into foreign territory, his movements hesitant, his senses overwhelmed by the unfamiliar sights and sounds of a home filled with the vibrant energy of 4 young children. He followed Caitlin to the living room, where all 4 girls were playing in a gated area, their laughter and babbling filling the air. They looked up curiously as the adults entered, their eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and innocent curiosity, ready to meet the father they had never known. Hello again, Mark said softly, kneeling by the gate. I'm your dad. Emma immediately toddled over to investigate him. Ava followed, while Olivia and Sophia watched from a distance. They're usually cautious with new people, Caitlin explained, but they seem curious about you. Mark opened the gate and sat on the floor. I brought them something. Is that okay? Of course. He placed the 4 gift bags in front of him. I wasn't sure what they might like. The store didn't open until 9, so I didn't have much time to choose. That was thoughtful, Caitlin said, sitting across from him on the carpet. Mark pulled identical teddy bears from the bags. The sales lady said these are good for their age. They're perfect, Caitlin assured him. Girls, look what your dad brought you. Mark handed a bear to Emma, who examined it carefully before hugging it. Ava took hers with a giggle. Mark placed the other 2 bears nearby for Olivia and Sophia, who were still keeping their distance. They're beautiful, Mark said, watching them play. So perfect. I still can't believe they're mine. Ours, Caitlin corrected gently. Mark looked at her. Yes, ours. He took a deep breath. Caitlin, I need to understand why you didn't tell me. Really understand. Caitlin watched the girls for a moment before answering. When we divorced, you made it very clear that you wanted to move on. You remarried so quickly. You seemed happy. I didn't think you'd want anything to do with me or the embryos we created. But once you were pregnant, once they were born, by then you had Tiffany and a new baby on the way. I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd try to take them from me? Caitlin admitted. Or that you'd reject them completely. Neither seemed like a good option. Mark was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. I wouldn't have taken them from you, he finally said. But I don't know if I would have embraced them either. Not right away. I was a different person then. And now I want to be their father. I want to support them, to know them. He looked directly at Caitlin. I've spoken with my lawyer already. I want to set up proper child support and establish legal paternity. Caitlin nodded. That seems reasonable. I'd also like regular visitation. I know they're young and they don't know me yet, but I want to build a relationship with them. We can work something out, Caitlin agreed. They need consistency and routine, but we can start with short visits and build from there. Mark watched as Sophia finally approached, cautiously reaching for the teddy bear he'd brought her. "Hi, Sophia," he said softly. "Remember me from last night?" To his surprise, Sophia climbed into his lap with her new bear. She looked up at him with serious eyes. His eyes. "She likes you," Caitlin said, smiling at her daughter's unusual boldness. "I like her too," Mark replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I like all of them." The peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of a car door slamming outside. Caitlin's mother appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. "Caitlin, there's someone else here to see you." Before Caitlin could respond, Tiffany Wilson pushed past her mother into the living room. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair disheveled. "So, this is where you ran off to," she said to Mark, her voice cold. "Playing happy family already?" Mark stood carefully, setting Sophia down. "Tiffany, you shouldn't be here. Shouldn't I? My husband disappears in the morning without a word, and I find out he's visiting his ex-wife and her secret babies. I think I have every right to be here." Caitlin stepped between Tiffany and the girls, who had grown quiet at the stranger's loud voice. "This is not the place for this conversation. The girls don't need to hear arguing." "The girls? The girls?" Tiffany mocked. "That's all either of you care about. What about Jackson? What about your actual son, Mark?" "Jackson is at home with the nanny, perfectly safe and happy," Mark replied. "And these are my actual daughters, Tiffany. We've been over this. You need to leave," Caitlin said firmly to Tiffany. "This is my home, and you're upsetting my children." Tiffany ignored her, focusing on Mark. "You have to choose them or us." Mark shook his head. "That's not a choice I'm willing to make. I'm going to be a father to all my children." "Then we're done," Tiffany declared. "I won't share you with them. I won't have those children in Jackson's life confusing him." "They're his sisters," Mark said quietly. "Half-sisters, but still family." Tiffany's face crumpled slightly, her anger giving way to hurt. "You never wanted a family with me. You just wanted a child, any child, and now you have 5. So, what do you need me for?" The raw pain in her voice made both Mark and Caitlin uncomfortable. Caitlin's mother stepped in, taking Tiffany's arm gently. "Why don't we go to the kitchen for some coffee?" she suggested. Let Mark and Caitlin finish their conversation about the children. Surprisingly, Tiffany allowed herself to be led away, her anger seemingly deflated by Mark's calm refusal to choose. "I'm sorry about that," Mark said once Tiffany was gone. "I didn't know she'd follow me." "It's okay," Caitlin assured him. "She's upset. It's understandable." Mark looked down at his daughters who had returned to their play now that the tension had dissipated. "She gave me an ultimatum last night, them or her and Jackson." "What are you going to do?" Caitlin asked. "I'm going to be a father to all 5 of my children," Mark said simply. "If Tiffany can't accept that, well then she's right. We are done." Caitlin watched Mark's determined face as he said those words. The sounds of her daughters playing filled the momentary silence between them. "Are you sure?" Caitlin finally asked. "I never intended to break up your marriage." "This isn't your fault," Mark replied. "I have responsibilities to all my children. If Tiffany can't understand that, then our marriage had bigger problems than I realized." From the kitchen, they could hear Tiffany's voice rising and falling as Caitlin's mother tried to calm her down. "I should check on them," Caitlin said, standing up. "I'll stay with the girls," Mark offered. In the kitchen, Caitlin found her mother sitting across from Tiffany at the small table. A cup of untouched coffee sat in front of Tiffany, who was wiping her eyes with a tissue. "Are you okay?" Caitlin asked, not sure if the question was appropriate, but feeling she should say something. Tiffany looked up, her perfect makeup now completely ruined. "What do you think? My husband has 4 secret children with his ex-wife. My life is falling apart, so no, I'm not okay." Caitlin sat down at the table. "I understand this is shocking for you, It wasn't my intention to hurt you personally. Then what was your intention? Why bring those girls to our Christmas party? Why not talk to Mark privately? I tried to imagine how I would want to learn about them if I were in your position, Caitlin said honestly. There was no perfect way, but after you invited me to the party, it seemed like the right moment. I invited you to show you how happy we were, Tiffany admitted, her voice small. To show you what you couldn't have. That was cruel of me. Yes, it was, Caitlin agreed. But I understand where it came from. You were protecting your family. Tiffany looked up, surprised by Caitlin's directness. And now you've destroyed it. I don't think that's true. Mark doesn't have to choose between his children. He can be a father to all of them. But he does have to choose between you and me, Tiffany said. Caitlin shook her head. No, he doesn't. I'm not asking for Mark back. I just want my daughters to know their father. Tiffany studied Caitlin's face, looking for deception. You don't want him back after everything? We divorced for a reason, Tiffany. Those reasons haven't changed. I'm not looking to reunite with Mark. I'm looking to co-parent with him. Co-parent? Tiffany repeated the word slowly. So, he'd split his time between two families. He'd be involved with all his children. The details would depend on what works for everyone. Tiffany was quiet for a moment, considering this. Then she stood up. I need to talk to Mark alone. Caitlin nodded and stepped aside. Tiffany walked back to the living room where Mark was sitting on the floor with Emma and Sophia, who were showing him their favorite toys. Mark, Tiffany said firmly, we need to talk in private. Mark looked up, surprised by her calmer tone. Okay. He carefully stood up. I'll be right back, he told the girls, who continued playing. Caitlin showed them to a small study off the main hallway. You can talk in here. I'll be with the girls. Once alone, Tiffany faced Mark. Did you mean what you said about being done if I can't accept these children? Yes, Mark said simply. They're my daughters, Tiffany. And what about me? What about Jackson? Do we just become your second choice family? Mark sighed heavily. No one is second choice. I can love all my children equally, but you'll have to divide your time, your attention, your money. Yes, that's what divorce with children is like. Tiffany's eyes widened. So, you're already thinking about divorce. I'm thinking about what you said. You gave me an ultimatum. Them or us. I'm choosing all of my children. If that means you want a divorce, then yes, I'm thinking about it. Tiffany sank into a chair. I never thought this would happen. We were supposed to be perfect. Nothing is perfect, Tiffany. Not even us. What about Jackson? He needs his father. And he'll have me, Mark assured her. Just like the girls will. I'll split my time. I'll be there for all of them. Tiffany was quiet for a long moment. I need time to think, she finally said. This is too much too fast. I understand. Mark nodded. Take whatever time you need. But my decision about being in the girls' lives isn't going to change. I'm going home, Tiffany said, standing up. Don't follow me. I need space. What about Jackson? He's with the nanny. He's fine. Tiffany walked to the door, then turned back. I do love you, Mark, but I don't know if I can share you like this. After Tiffany left, Mark returned to the living room. Caitlin was sitting on the floor with all four girls now, reading them a story. Is everything okay? She asked, looking up. She's gone home. She needs time to think. Mark sat down across from them. But I meant what I said. I want to be part of the girls' lives, whatever that means for my marriage. Caitlin nodded, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. We should talk about practical things then. How involved do you want to be? As involved as possible, Mark said immediately. I've already missed so much. Their birth, their first steps, their first words. They're still so young. Caitlin reminded him. You haven't missed everything. I want regular visitation. At first, maybe I could visit here a few times a week until they're more comfortable with me. Then eventually they could come stay with me. That seems reasonable, Caitlin agreed. But they need consistency and routine, especially at this age. I understand. I'll work around their schedule. Caitlin hesitated before asking her next question. And what about Jackson? Will the girls meet their half-brother? Mark's face softened. Yes, eventually, once Tiffany has processed everything. He's their brother. They should know each other. The front door opened and Martha walked in, stopping short when she saw Mark. "Oh, I didn't realize you'd still be here," she said. "Martha, this is Mark Wilson." Caitlin introduced them formally. "Mark, this is Martha Jenkins, our amazing helper. We met briefly last night," Mark said, standing to shake her hand. "Thank you for taking such good care of my daughters. They're wonderful girls." Martha smiled. "Very easy to love." "Martha, Tiffany came by earlier," Caitlin explained. "She was upset, but she's gone now. Mark and I have been discussing visitation arrangements." "I see." Martha nodded, understanding the significance. "I'll just go put my things away." "Actually," Mark said, checking his watch, "I should be going. I have a meeting I can't miss." He looked genuinely disappointed. "Can I come back tomorrow? Maybe around the same time?" "Of course," Caitlin agreed. Mark knelt down next to the girls. "I have to go now, but I'll come back tomorrow. Promise." Emma looked up at him curiously. Sophia handed him the teddy bear he'd brought her. "No, sweetheart, that's yours." Mark smiled, gently pushing it back toward her. "I'll bring you something else tomorrow." "You don't need to bring gifts every time," Caitlin said. "I know, but I want to. I have so much to make up for." Mark stood and gathered his coat. "I'll call my lawyer today about the child support arrangements, and I'd like to start a college fund for each of them." "That's very generous," Caitlin said, walking him to the door. At the doorway, Mark paused. "Caitlin, I want you to know that I don't blame you for not telling me sooner. I understand why you did it. Thank you for saying that. I'm sorry for how things ended between us," he continued. "I was impatient and selfish. I couldn't see past my own disappointment." "We both made mistakes," Caitlin said gently, "but yours resulted in 4 beautiful girls." Mark smiled. "So I can't be too upset about it." After Mark left, Caitlin returned to the living room where her mother had joined Martha and the girls. "That went better than I expected," her mother said. "For now," Caitlin cautioned. "Tiffany is still processing everything. What do you think she'll do?" Martha asked. "I don't know. But whatever happens between Mark and Tiffany, I believe he'll be there for the girls." "And how do you feel about that?" her mother asked carefully. Caitlin considered the question. "Relieved. The girls deserve to know their father, and Mark deserves a chance to be a good father to them." "Even after he left you?" Martha couldn't help asking. "Yes," Caitlin said firmly. "What happened between Mark and me is separate from his relationship with our daughters. I won't let my past hurt affect their future." The doorbell rang again. Caitlin opened it to find Dr. Wells standing on her porch. "I hope I'm not interrupting," the doctor said. "I just wanted to check in after last night's excitement." "Not at all." Caitlin welcomed her in. "Mark was just here, actually." "Really? That was quick." "Yes, he wants to be involved with the girls. We're working out the details." Dr. Wells looked pleased. "That's wonderful news. And how are the little ones today?" "They're perfect. Come see them." As they walked back to the living room, Dr. Wells lowered her voice. "And how are you? This must be emotional for you, too." "I'm okay," Caitlin said. "Better than I expected, actually. For so long, I worried about this moment. How Mark would react. What would happen to the girls. Now that it's happening, I feel lighter somehow." "Secrets are heavy burdens," Dr. Wells observed. "Even when we think we're carrying them for the right reasons." The rest of the day passed quickly. Dr. Wells examined all 4 girls, declaring them perfectly healthy and developing well. Martha helped with lunch and nap time. Caitlin's parents took turns playing with the girls and giving Caitlin moments of rest. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Caitlin sat alone on her porch. The Christmas lights from neighboring houses cast a soft glow over the snow-covered street. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Meeting with lawyer arranged for next week." Also booked first appointment with family therapist to help with transition. Thank you for today. Looking forward to tomorrow. Caitlin smiled at the message. It was so typically Mark, efficient, organized, solution-focused, but now those qualities would be directed toward being a good father to their daughters. She texted back, "Girls, enjoyed meeting you. See you at 10:30. As she looked up at the night sky, Caitlin felt a sense of peace she hadn't expected. The revelation that had seemed so daunting for so many months was now behind her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone anymore. The girls would know their father. Mark would know his daughters. And somehow they would all find a way forward together. 6 months passed quickly. The winter snow melted, spring flowers bloomed, and before Caitlin knew it, June arrived with warm sunshine and longer days. The girls grew and changed every day, saying new words, developing stronger personalities, becoming more independent. Mark had kept his promise. He visited regularly twice each week, gradually building relationships with each of his daughters. After the first month, he began taking them to his new apartment in Boston for short visits. By spring, they were comfortable spending half a day with him. Tiffany had filed for separation in January. Unable to accept the new reality, she moved with Jackson to her parents' home in Connecticut, allowing Mark scheduled visits with his son. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. Today was special, the Quadruplets' second birthday. Caitlin had spent the morning decorating her backyard with balloons and streamers. For small cakes, each with a number 2 candle, sat on a table under a shade tree. "Need any help?" Martha asked, carrying out a tray of juice boxes. "I think we're almost ready," Caitlin replied. "Guests should start arriving in about 30 minutes. The girls are dressed and ready." Caitlin's mother called from the back door. "Your father is keeping them entertained." Caitlin smiled. The past 6 months had been challenging but rewarding. Her parents had decided to stay in Boston permanently, buying a small house just 10 minutes away. Martha continued to help part-time, and Caitlin had returned to her teaching job in January. The doorbell rang, and Caitlin went to answer it. Dr. Wells stood on the porch holding 4 identical wrapped presents. "Happy birthday to the Miracle Girls," she said warmly. "I can't believe they're 2 already. Thank you for coming, Samantha." Caitlin welcomed her in. "The girls will be so excited to see you." Dr. Wells had become more than just their doctor over the past months. She visited regularly, both professionally and as a friend. "Is Mark coming?" she asked as they walked toward the backyard. "Yes, he'll be here. He texted earlier to say he might be a few minutes late. He has special gifts he wanted to pick up." In the living room, Caitlin's father was sitting on the floor with all 4 girls. They wore matching yellow sundresses, but with different colored hair ribbons. Emma's was red, Olivia's blue, Ava's green, and Sophia's purple. The color system had been Mark's idea, a way for everyone to tell them apart more easily. "Look who's here, girls," Caitlin announced. "Dr. Samantha came to your party." Emma immediately stood up and toddled over. "Sam," she said clearly, reaching up. Dr. Wells laughed and picked her up. "Hello, birthday girl. You remembered my name." "She remembers everyone," Caitlin's father said proudly. "That one has a mind like a steel trap." More guests began arriving. Neighbors who had helped during the early days with the Quadruplets, teachers from Caitlin's school, and friends who had supported her through everything. Rachel arrived with her husband, carrying a large play tent as a gift. "This is officially the coolest birthday party I've ever been to," she declared, hugging Caitlin. "It's just a small gathering," Caitlin laughed. "Small? There are 4 birthday girls and about 40 guests." The doorbell rang again. This time, David Chun and his wife, Sarah, stood at the door with an enormous gift. "We may have gone overboard," Sarah admitted sheepishly. "It's a playground set for your backyard. David's brother is bringing the rest of it later." "That's incredibly generous," Caitlin said, touched by their kindness. "The girls have given us so much joy these past months," David replied. "We wanted to do something special." David and Sarah had become close friends, visiting often and even babysitting occasionally when Caitlin needed a break. The party moved to the backyard, where the girls delighted in all the attention. Ava made everyone laugh with her silly dancing. Olivia carefully examined each gift before moving on to the next. Sophia made sure each of her sisters had equal turns with new toys. And Emma, as always, directed the whole operation. They have such distinct personalities, Sarah observed, watching them play. It's amazing they're identical. Mark says that's how nature balances things. Caitlin smiled. Same outside, different inside. Speaking of Mark, the back gate opened, and he walked in carrying 4 gift bags and a larger box. He looked different than he had 6 months ago. More relaxed in casual clothes, with slightly longer hair and a short beard. Sorry I'm late, he called. The store didn't have 4 of the same doll, so I had to go to 2 different locations. The girls spotted him immediately. Daddy! They shouted in unison, running toward him with wobbling steps. Mark set down his gifts and knelt to receive their hugs. Happy birthday, my beautiful girls! He hugged each one, calling them by name without hesitation. Emma, you're getting so tall. Olivia, I love your serious face. Ava, did you learn a new dance? And Sophia, are you taking care of your sisters? Caitlin watched from a distance, still amazed at how naturally Mark had taken to fatherhood once given the chance. Therapy had helped him understand his past mistakes, and he worked hard to be present for all his children. He's good with them, Martha said, appearing beside Caitlin. He is, Caitlin agreed. Better than I expected. And Jackson, has there been any progress there? Caitlin nodded. Mark brought him last weekend. He's still too young to really understand, but he seemed to enjoy playing with the girls. And Tiffany, still angry from what Mark says, but she's allowing the visits, which is something. Mark made his way over to Caitlin after greeting the girls. Everything looks great, he said. You've done an amazing job with the party. Thank you. I'm glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it. He held up his phone. I took a video of Jackson this morning saying happy birthday to his sisters. I thought we could show the girls later. That's perfect. Caitlin smiled. They'll love that. The party continued with games, food, and finally cake. The girls needed help blowing out their candles, with Mark and Caitlin each assisting 2 of them. Everyone sang happy birthday, and the girls clapped along, delighted by all the attention. After cake, it was time for presents. The pile was enormous, but the girls were more interested in the wrapping paper than most of the gifts inside. Mark's gifts were a hit. For different dolls, each chosen to match the personality of each girl. He had also brought a large box containing a child-sized table with 4 chairs. For their art projects, he explained. I noticed they love drawing when they visit my place. That's very. Mark lowered himself to the ground in front of Caitlin's gate. A hopeful yet nervous expression etched on his face. Hello again, he began, his voice soft. I'm your dad. As if on cue, little Emma, her curiosity piqued, waddled right over to him, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and intrigue. Ava, never one to be left out, followed close behind. Olivia and Sophia, however, remained a little further back, their expressions cautious, observing the scene with a healthy dose of skepticism. Caitlin, sensing the girls' hesitation, offered a gentle explanation. They're usually a little wary around new faces, she told Mark, but they certainly seem interested in you. With a reassuring smile, Mark unlatched the gate and stepped inside, settling down on the floor, meeting the girls at their level. I brought them something, he said, his gaze meeting Caitlin's. Is that okay? Of course it is, she replied, her voice warm and welcoming. He carefully placed 4 identical gift bags in front of him, a touch of uncertainty in his eyes. I wasn't really sure what they might like, he admitted. The store didn't even open until 9 this morning, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to choose. Caitlin, touched by his thoughtfulness, replied, That was incredibly thoughtful, Mark. She walked over and sat cross-legged on the carpet across from him. With a flourish, Mark reached into each of the bags and pulled out a fluffy teddy bear. The sales lady assured me that these were perfect for their age group, he explained. Caitlin, examining the bears, gave him an affirming nod. "They're absolutely perfect," she said with genuine enthusiasm. Turning to the girls, she added, "Girls, look what your dad brought for you." Mark gently offered a bear to Emma, who approached it with cautious curiosity, examining it with painstaking care before finally giving it a tight hug. Ava, on the other hand, snatched hers up with an excited giggle, clearly delighted with her new plush companion. Mark carefully positioned the remaining 2 bears close to Olivia and Sophia, hoping to coax them out of their shyness. "They're all so beautiful," Mark said, his eyes filled with emotion as he watched the girls begin to tentatively play with the bears. "So perfect. I still can't quite wrap my head around the fact that they're mine." Caitlin, gently correcting him, said, "Ours, Mark." He looked at her, his expression softening. "Yes, ours." Taking a deep breath, he continued, his tone becoming more serious. "Caitlin, I need to try to understand why you didn't tell me. I mean, really understand." Caitlin paused, turning her gaze to the girls for a long moment before responding, as if gathering her thoughts. "When we got divorced, you were crystal clear about wanting to move on," she began, her voice measured. "You remarried so quickly. You seemed genuinely happy. I honestly didn't think you'd want anything to do with me, or with the embryos we created. But once you found out you were pregnant, and once they were born," Mark prompted gently. "By then, you had Tiffany, and a new baby on the way," Caitlin explained, a hint of vulnerability creeping into her voice. "I was scared." "Scared of what, Caitlin?" Mark asked. "I was afraid that you'd try to take them away from me," Caitlin confessed, her eyes meeting his. "Or that you'd reject them completely." Neither option seemed like a good outcome for the girls. Mark was silent for a moment, carefully absorbing her words, processing the depth of her fears. "I wouldn't have tried to take them from you," he finally said, his voice filled with sincerity. "But I honestly don't know if I would have embraced them right away either. I was a different person back then. And now? Now what?" Caitlin asked softly. "And now," Mark replied, his voice firm with resolve. "Now I want to be their father. I want to support them, to get to know them, to be in their lives." He looked directly at Caitlin, his gaze unwavering. "I've already spoken with my lawyer. I want to set up proper child support arrangements and legally establish my paternity." Caitlin, nodding slowly, replied, "That seems fair and reasonable. I'd also like to have regular visitation," Mark continued. "I understand that they're young, and they don't know me yet, but I really want to build a lasting relationship with them." "We can definitely work something out," Caitlin assured him. "They definitely thrive on consistency and routine, but we can start with shorter visits and gradually build from there." Mark's eyes followed Sophia as she cautiously made her way toward him, her little hand reaching out to touch the teddy bear he had brought for her. "Hi, Sophia," he said gently, his voice filled with affection. "Do you remember me from last night?" To Mark's complete surprise, Sophia climbed right into his lap, snuggling up with her new teddy bear. She looked up at him with wide, serious eyes, her gaze studying his face intently. "His eyes," she murmured softly. Caitlin, smiling at her daughter's unexpected boldness, chuckled softly. "I think she likes you, Mark." "I like her too," Mark replied, his voice choked with emotion. "I like all of them." The peaceful moment was abruptly shattered by the sound of a car door slamming shut outside. Caitlin's mother appeared in the doorway, her expression etched with concern. "Caitlin, there's someone else here to see you," she announced. Before Caitlin could even respond, Tiffany Wilson barged past her mother into the living room, her eyes red and swollen, her usually impeccable hair a mess. "So, this is where you've been hiding," she said to Mark, her voice icy. "Playing happy family already, I see." Mark, carefully placing Sophia back on the floor, stood up to face his wife. "Tiffany, you shouldn't have come here," he said, his tone firm but measured. "Shouldn't I?" Tiffany retorted, her voice rising in anger. "My husband disappears this morning without saying a single word, and then I find out that he's here, visiting his ex-wife and his secret babies. I think I have every damn right to be here. Caitlin, stepping protectively between Tiffany and the girls, who had grown silent and wide-eyed at the sound of the stranger's raised voice, said calmly, "This is definitely not the place to have this conversation. The girls don't need to be subjected to arguing." "The girls? The girls?" Tiffany mocked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's all either of you seem to care about. What about Jackson, Mark? What about your son?" "Jackson is at home with his nanny, perfectly safe and happy," Mark replied, his voice steady. "And these are my daughters, Tiffany. We've been over this. You need to leave now," Caitlin said firmly, her eyes locking with Tiffany's. "This is my home, and you're upsetting my children." Ignoring Caitlin completely, Tiffany focused her anger on Mark. "You have to choose, Mark. It's them or us." Mark slowly shook his head, his expression resolute. "That's not a choice I'm willing to make, Tiffany. I'm going to be a father to all of my children. Then we're done," Tiffany declared, her voice filled with finality. "I won't share you with them, Mark. I won't have those children in Jackson's life, confusing him and turning our lives upside down." "They're his sisters, Tiffany," Mark said quietly, his voice laced with sadness. "Half-sisters, maybe, but they're still family." Tiffany's face crumpled slightly, her anger giving way to a raw, vulnerable hurt. "You never really wanted a family with me, did you, Mark? You just wanted a child, any child, and now you have 5 of them. So what do you even need me for?" The raw pain in Tiffany's voice hung heavy in the air, making both Mark and Caitlin deeply uncomfortable. Caitlin's mother, sensing the mounting tension, stepped forward, gently taking Tiffany's arm. "Why don't we all go to the kitchen and have some coffee?" she suggested, her voice calm and soothing. Let Mark and Caitlin finish discussing the children. To everyone's surprise, Tiffany allowed herself to be led away, her anger seemingly deflated by Mark's unwavering refusal to choose. "I'm so sorry about that outburst," Mark said to Caitlin, his voice filled with regret. "I really had no idea that she would follow me here." "It's okay, Mark," Caitlin assured him, offering a reassuring smile. "She's understandably upset. I would be too." Mark looked down at his daughters, who, sensing that the tension had passed, had returned to their playing. "She issued an ultimatum last night," he said, his voice thoughtful. "It's them or it's her and Jackson. So, what are you going to do?" Caitlin asked, her eyes searching his. "I'm going to be a father to all 5 of my children," Mark stated simply, his voice clear and unwavering. "And if Tiffany can't accept that," Caitlin finished the thought for him. "Then she's right, Mark. You're done." She carefully watched Mark's face, searching for any hint of hesitation or doubt, but found only a deep resolve. The soft sounds of the girls playing filled the brief silence that settled between them. "Are you completely sure about this?" Caitlin asked finally, breaking the silence. "I really never intended to break up your marriage, Mark." "This isn't your fault, Caitlin," Mark insisted gently. "I have responsibilities to all of my children now, and if Tiffany can't understand and accept that, then our marriage has even bigger problems than I ever realized." From the kitchen, the murmur of voices could be heard, Tiffany's voice rising and falling in agitation as Caitlin's mother tried to calm her down. "I probably should go and check on them," Caitlin said, rising to her feet. "I'll stay here with the girls," Mark offered. Stepping into the kitchen, Caitlin found her mother sitting across from Tiffany at the small kitchen table. A cup of coffee sat untouched in front of Tiffany, who was dabbing at her tear-streaked face with a tissue. "Are you doing okay?" Caitlin asked, uncertain if the question was appropriate given the circumstances, but feeling obligated to say something. Tiffany looked up, her carefully applied makeup now completely ruined. "What do you think, Caitlin? My husband has 4 secret kids with his ex-wife. My whole life is falling apart right in front of my eyes. So no, I'm definitely not okay." Caitlin pulled up a chair and sat down at the table, facing Tiffany. "I truly understand that this must be a terrible shock to you, Tiffany," she said softly. "It really wasn't ever my intention to hurt you personally." "Then what was your intention, Caitlin?" Tiffany retorted. "That's thoughtful," Caitlin remarked, expressing her gratitude. Thank you. As the birthday party began to wind down, Caitlin found herself standing beside Mark on the front porch. They watched their daughters playing together, completely engrossed in their new birthday toys. I can hardly believe they're already two, Mark commented quietly, a hint of wistfulness in his voice. I really wish I'd been there from the very beginning, you know? You're here now, Caitlin responded, offering a gentle reassurance. That's what truly matters, Mark. My therapist keeps telling me I need to stop dwelling on the things I missed and instead just really focus on being present. Right here, right now. That's easier said than done, Mark admitted with a sigh. It's good advice, I know, but sometimes it's just hard to put into practice. You're doing a wonderful job, Caitlin assured him, her voice filled with warmth. The girls absolutely adore you. So, how are you holding up with everything? Caitlin paused for a moment, thoughtfully considering the question. I'm good, actually. Really good. Having you so involved has honestly made things easier in so many ways. I'm glad to hear that, Mark replied, then hesitated slightly before continuing. I wanted to talk to you about something. It's about the custody arrangement. Is something wrong with it? Caitlin asked, a flicker of concern crossing her face. No, it's working out really well, Mark was quick to reassure her. But I was thinking about the future. As the girls get older, they're going to need even more stability, more consistency between their two homes, you know? Caitlin nodded in agreement. That makes perfect sense. So, I've actually been looking at houses in this neighborhood, Mark revealed. I really want to be closer by so that we can make the transitions easier on them. Wow, that's a big step, Caitlin responded, a hint of surprise in her voice. It just feels like the right thing to do, Mark explained. Being a father to all 5 of my kids is my absolute priority now. He glanced at her briefly before adding, my lawyer suggested that we should maybe consider drawing up a more formal co-parenting plan as the girls get older. Something that really addresses things like school choices, extracurricular activities, all of that. I agree, Caitlin said. I think we should definitely start planning for the future. They both watched as Emma skillfully organized her sisters into a neat little line, carefully distributing pieces of one of their new toys evenly among them. She's a natural-born leader, that one, Mark observed with a smile. Just like her father, Caitlin said, returning his smile. And stubborn as her mother, Mark added with a laugh. Their easy conversation was interrupted when David approached, his wife Sarah by his side. We're about to head out, David announced, but just wanted to let you know that the playground set will be delivered tomorrow. I hope that's okay? More than okay, Caitlin assured him. Thank you both so much. We really appreciate it. After David and Sarah left, the rest of the guests began departing one by one. Dr. Wells generously stayed behind to help clean up, along with Martha and Caitlin's parents. By evening, the yard was spotless. The girls were bathed and dressed in their pajamas, and the house was finally quiet again. Mark had stayed to help with bedtime, reading a favorite story to all 4 girls as they crowded onto his lap, eager to be close to him. Daddy, stay? Sophia pleaded softly as he gently tucked her into her crib. Not tonight, sweetheart, Mark said gently, stroking her hair. But I'll see you on Wednesday for our special day. Okay? Promise. Emma demanded from her own crib, her little face serious. I promise, Mark assured her. I'll always come back, Emma. You can count on it. After the girls were finally asleep, Mark and Caitlin stood together in the hallway just outside the nursery. Thank you for today, Caitlin, Mark said sincerely. For everything, really. You don't need to thank me, Mark, Caitlin replied, waving off his gratitude. We're partners in this, co-parents. Mark nodded in agreement. I think we're doing a pretty good job at it. Better than okay, Caitlin corrected him with a smile. The girls are happy, and that's what matters most. As Mark prepared to leave, he paused at the front door, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, I never thought my life would turn out this way, he said quietly. But honestly, I wouldn't change it now. Me neither, Caitlin agreed, echoing his sentiment. Even the hard parts led us here to this. They shared a warm smile, not as former spouses or potential romantic partners, but as two people united by the immense love they shared for their daughters. It wasn't the traditional family either of them had once imagined, but it was theirs, and it was undeniably good. After Mark finally left, Caitlin quietly checked on the girls one last time before heading to bed herself. All four were sleeping peacefully, surrounded by their new birthday treasures. Emma was clutching the doll Mark had given her tightly in her arms. Olivia had her new book lying nearby on her pillow. Ava had fallen asleep mid-giggle, a sweet smile still playing on her face. And Sophia, always the peacemaker, had her little arms stretched out toward her sister's crib, as if reaching out to her even in her sleep. Caitlin's heart felt incredibly full as she gently closed their bedroom door. The journey to this moment had been unexpected and often difficult, but as she looked at her daughters, secure in the knowledge that they were deeply loved by both of their parents, she knew without a doubt that every single step had been worth it.